Why are you even here? My wife's sister sneered at her own wedding. But when the groom saw me, he turned pale. He rushed to his father, a high-ranking general, and whispered, "Dad, that's him, the legendary officer." The groom's father rose instantly, saluted sharply, and said, "Sir, it's an honor to stand in your presence." My wife and her sister couldn't breathe. I remember thinking the chandelier looked like frozen tears. It hung there in the hotel ballroom, this massive, glittering thing that probably cost more than most people make in a year, and all I could think was how much it reminded me of ice forming on metal in the mountains. The kind of ice that forms so slowly, so deliberately, that by the time you notice it, it's already too late to do anything about it. That's how this whole thing felt. Too late. Are you even listening to me? Sarah's voice cut through my thoughts like a blade through silk. My wife, though some days I wondered if that word still meant what it used to, stood beside me in the hotel lobby, her arms crossed in that way she'd perfected over the years. The way that said she was already disappointed before I'd even had a chance to fail. "I'm listening," I said quietly. "Then why do you have that look on your face? That distant look?" She adjusted the strap of her designer handbag, a gift from her sister. Naturally, everything was always from her sister. Rebecca has been planning this wedding for 18 months. 18 months, David. The least you could do is pretend to be present. Present. The irony of that word wasn't lost on me. I'd spent the better part of 2 decades being present in places most people couldn't find on a map. Being present in moments when presence meant the difference between life and death, between success and catastrophic failure, between coming home and becoming a memory. But here, in this marble-floored lobby, with its overpriced flower arrangements and its carefully curated ambient music, my presence, apparently, wasn't the right kind. "I'm here, aren't I?" I said, and immediately regretted it. Sarah's eyes narrowed. "Physically, yes. Mentally, emotionally, you checked out years ago, David." The elevator arrived with a soft chime that sounded like a bell at a funeral. We stepped inside, and I caught our reflection in the polished brass doors as they slid shut. Sarah looked stunning in her burgundy dress, her hair swept up in some elaborate style that had taken 3 hours at a salon I couldn't pronounce the name of. I stood beside her in my simple gray suit, not cheap, but not designer either, and the contrast between us felt like something you could measure with instruments. When had we become so different? Or had we always been this way? And I'd just been too busy, too deployed, too absent to notice. "Rebecca wants you to sit in the back," Sarah said as we ascended. During the ceremony, I turned to look at her. "The back?" She has a seating chart. Very specific. Very organized. Sarah wouldn't meet my eyes. She thinks it would be better if you weren't too visible in the photos. "I'm family," I said, keeping my voice level. "I'm married to her sister. You're also..." She trailed off, searching for the right word. "You're difficult to explain." Difficult to explain. That was a new one. Over the years, I'd been called a lot of things. By my men. Sir. Boss. The old man. Though I wasn't that old. Just weathered. By the enemy. Target. Priority. The ghost. A nickname I never asked for and never particularly liked. By my superiors. Reliable. Essential. Occasionally reckless when the situation demanded it. But difficult to explain? That was uniquely Sarah's contribution to my collection of descriptors. The elevator doors opened onto the 3rd floor, where the pre-ceremony reception was already underway. The sound hit us first laughter, clinking glasses, the kind of idle chatter that only happens when people have nothing substantial to worry about. Then the smell, expensive perfume, fresh flowers, and something cooking in the catering station that probably had a French name. "Just try to blend in," Sarah said, already moving away from me toward a cluster of her relatives. "And for God's sake, don't talk about work. Don't talk about work." As if I ever did. I found a spot near one of the tall windows overlooking the city and settled in, holding a glass of champagne I had no intention of drinking. The bubbles rose in steady streams, like tiny distress signals that no one but me seemed to notice. "You must be David." I turned to find a man about my age, maybe slightly younger, with the kind of confident smile that came from never having been told no. He extended his hand. "Marcus Brennan. I'm with the Groom's family. Cousin, technically. But we grew up more like brothers." I shook his hand. His grip was firm but not aggressive, the handshake of someone who'd learned the gesture in business school, not in the field. "David Chen," I said. "So you're married to the bride's sister?" Marcus sipped his champagne. "That's got to be interesting. Two sisters, two very different lives from what I hear." "Different," I agreed. "That's one word for it." "Rebecca speaks very highly of herself," Marcus said with a laugh. "And from what I understand, she's not particularly warm toward her sister's situation." His eyes were curious, probing. I recognized the look, the same one intelligence analysts got when they were trying to piece together incomplete information. "It's complicated," I said, which was the truth wearing its most convenient disguise. "Isn't it always?" Marcus gestured around the room. "This whole thing must have cost a fortune." Gregory's father spared no expense. Of course, when you're a two-star general with connections in every branch of the military and half the defense contractors in Washington, money isn't exactly an obstacle. My attention sharpened at that. "General, two-star. Gregory's father is military?" I asked carefully. "Oh yeah, big time. General Thomas Hartley. Probably one of the most respected officers in the Army. Commands respect wherever he goes." Marcus leaned in conspiratorially. "Between you and me, I think that's half the reason Rebecca wanted to marry Gregory. The prestige, the connections, the lifestyle. Not that she'd ever admit it, of course. Of course not." Before I could respond, a commotion near the entrance drew everyone's attention. Rebecca had arrived. My sister-in-law swept into the room like a storm system with excellent hair. Her wedding dress probably cost more than a new car, a tasteful car, not an economy model, and she wore it with the kind of confidence that only comes from knowing everyone is looking at you and finding exactly what you expected them to find. Behind her, holding her train with the careful reverence of someone handling explosives, came her maid of honor and two bridesmaids. Sarah wasn't among them. My wife stood near the catering station, her smile fixed in place like a painting of happiness rather than the real thing. "There she is," Marcus murmured. "The queen of the day." Rebecca made her rounds, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced grace. She laughed at jokes that probably weren't funny and touched people's arms in that way that made them feel special, chosen, noticed. She was good at this, at being the center of attention, at making people feel like they were part of something exclusive just by being in her presence. I watched from my window, holding my champagne, feeling like a ghost at my own family's gathering. Then, Rebecca's eyes found me. The change in her expression was subtle but unmistakable. The smile remained, but it hardened around the edges. Her eyes narrowed just slightly, the way you might look at a stain on an otherwise pristine tablecloth. She excused herself from her current conversation and walked toward me. Each step was measured, deliberate. Marcus sensed the shift in atmosphere and quietly excused himself, leaving me alone to face whatever was coming. "David," Rebecca said, her voice carrying just enough warmth to pass as civil in public. "How unexpected to see you here." "Unexpected?" I kept my tone neutral. "I'm married to your sister." "Yes, well." She glanced around, making sure no one was listening too closely. "I did wonder if you'd actually show up. Sarah mentioned you might be busy." I made it work, clearly. Her eyes traveled over my suit, my simple watch, my unadorned appearance. "Though I see you didn't make much effort with your wardrobe. This is a high society wedding, David, not a whatever it is you usually do." "I wore a suit," I said. Seemed appropriate. "A suit from where? A department store?" She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Never mind. I suppose we can't all have taste, or means." The means comment stung, not because it was unexpected, but because it was so casually cruel. Rebecca had been making comments like this for years, little barbs about my income, my career, my apparent lack of ambition. Sarah usually deflected them, made excuses, but lately she'd stopped even trying. "I need you to do me a favor," Rebecca continued, her voice dropping lower. "During the ceremony, I'd like you to sit in the back, the very back. And during the reception, perhaps you could minimize your presence. I have a lot of important guests here. Military leadership, business executives, politicians. I can't have them asking awkward questions about my sister's situation." "Situation," I repeated. "You know what I mean." She fixed me with a look that had probably worked on lesser people. "Sarah deserves better than what you've given her. We all know it. She knows it. Even you must know it. Somewhere in that silent, emotionless head of yours." I thought about responding, thought about defending myself, explaining, making her understand. But what would be the point? Rebecca had already decided who I was, what I represented. Nothing I said would change that. "I'll sit where Sarah wants me to sit," I said finally. "Sarah wants you to not embarrass her," Rebecca shot back. "That's what Sarah wants. But she's too loyal, too stuck to actually say it. So I'm saying it for her." "Stay out of the way, David. This is my day. Don't ruin it." She turned and walked away before I could respond, her dress trailing behind her like a royal decree. I stood there by the window, watching the city below. People move through their lives down there, tiny figures, with their own problems, their own disappointments, their own moments of being told they weren't good enough. That looked pleasant. I turned to find an older gentleman standing nearby, a slight smile on his weathered face. He wore a dress uniform, Army, full honors, enough ribbons and medals to tell a story that would take hours to fully comprehend. 2 stars gleamed on his shoulders. General Hartley, I presumed. "Family dynamics," I said simply. "They're never simple." "No," he agreed. "They rarely are. I'm Thomas Hartley, by the way, father of the groom, David Chin." We shook hands, and I felt him assess me the way only career military men can, taking in posture, bearing, the tiny details that separate those who've served from those who haven't. "You have the look," he said thoughtfully. "Military was," I said. "Long time ago. Once a soldier, always a soldier," he said. "Which branch?" "Army, mostly. Specialized work." "Specialized." His eyes sharpened with interest. "Infantry? Rangers? Special forces?" Before I could answer, a young man approached, tall, nervous, with the kind of eager energy that comes from wanting everything to be perfect. "The groom, obviously." "Dad, they need you for photos," he said, then noticed me standing there. His eyes traveled over me, that same assessing look his father had given me. "Oh, sorry. I'm Gregory. You're with the bride's family?" "Sarah's husband," I said. "Ah, right. He trailed off, clearly searching for whatever description Rebecca had given him. The quiet one. "That's one way to put it," his father said with amusement. "We were just discussing military service. David here was Army, specialized work," he says. Gregory's attention had already drifted. "That's nice. Dad, seriously, they're waiting." They walked away, leaving me alone again by the window. The ceremony would begin soon. I would sit in the back, as requested. I would be quiet, as expected. I would be exactly what everyone assumed. I was unremarkable, forgettable, difficult to explain. And tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after that, I would go back to my other life, the one Sarah didn't ask about anymore, the one Rebecca couldn't begin to understand, the one that existed in spaces between the things that made it into official reports. I finished my champagne, actually drank it this time, and felt the bubbles sting my throat. The chandelier above caught my eye again. All those crystals, all that light, all that carefully constructed beauty hanging by threads strong enough to hold, but invisible enough to forget. Until something goes wrong, until the weight becomes too much, until everything comes crashing down. I walked toward the ballroom, where rows of white chairs waited in perfect formation, where flower arrangements bloomed in colors that had been chosen 18 months ago, where a wedding would happen and a marriage would begin, and everyone would smile for photos that would hang on walls and tell a story that may or may not be true. The back row was mostly empty. I sat down and waited for whatever came next. The ballroom filled like a theater before a performance everyone had already decided would be brilliant. I watched from my position in the back row, so far back, I was practically in the hallway as guests filtered in wearing their expensive clothes and their carefully practiced expressions of joy. Women in dresses that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Men in suits that had been tailored to disguise the softness that comes from lives spent behind desks rather than in trenches. They all knew each other, these people. You could tell by the way they greeted one another, the casual familiarity of shared country clubs, shared investment strategies, shared assumptions about how the world worked and who deserved to succeed in it. I recognized a few faces from the news. A congressman from Virginia, a CEO whose company had been investigated for something I couldn't quite remember, a woman who ran a foundation that claimed to help veterans, but mostly just hosted galas where people wore their compassion like jewelry. None of them looked back this far. Why would they? Sarah entered with a group of relatives, her face composed in that expression she'd mastered, pleasant but not quite happy, present but not quite there. She glanced back once, briefly, and our eyes met. Something flickered across her face. Guilt? Embarrassment? Relief that I'd actually listened and stayed out of the way? She looked away quickly and found a seat in the third row, close enough to matter, but not so close as to be in the immediate family section. The geography of family relationships, mapped out in rows of white chairs. "Is this seat taken?" An elderly woman stood beside me, leaning on a cane, her eyes sharp despite the wrinkles that surrounded them. She wore a simple navy dress and a string of pearls that looked like they'd been earned through decades of life rather than purchased through decades of wealth. "All yours," I said, starting to stand. "Don't get up on my account." She settled in with a soft sigh. Bad knees. Got them from teaching elementary school for 40 years. All that kneeling down to talk to children at their level. "I'm Dorothy, by the way. Gregory's grandmother. His mother's mother, technically, though she passed 12 years ago. David Chen. I'm married to the bride's sister." Ah, the mysterious brother-in-law. Dorothy's eyes crinkled with what might have been amusement. "Rebecca mentioned you. Said you were complicated. Seems to be the consensus." "Complicated is better than simple," Dorothy said. "Simple people are boring. Complicated people have stories." She studied me with the kind of attention teachers develop the ability to see past surfaces to whatever's underneath. "You have a story, Mr. Chen. I can tell. It's in your eyes, in the way you hold yourself." Before I could respond, music began to play something classical and emotional that was probably supposed to make people feel things. The guests quieted, turned their attention forward. The ceremony was beginning. Gregory entered from the side with his best man and groomsmen, all of them looking nervous and excited and young in that way that makes you remember when you were young too, when you believed everything would work out because you wanted it to. Then came the bridesmaids, gliding down the aisle in their coordinated dresses, carrying their matching bouquets, smiling their matching smiles. Then the music changed, swelled into something larger, more significant, and everyone stood. Rebecca appeared at the entrance. I'll give her this. She knew how to make an entrance. The dress caught the light in ways that seemed almost calculated, as if she'd positioned herself specifically to maximize the effect. Her face was radiant with exactly the right amount of emotion, joyful but not overwhelming, elegant but not cold, perfect but somehow still human. Everyone watched her walk down that aisle like they were witnessing something holy. I watched the people watching her. That's what you learn to do in my line of work. You don't watch the main event. You watch the reactions, the periphery, the things people think no one is paying attention to. That's where the truth lives, in the margins, in the moments between the moments everyone remembers. Sarah was crying. Not the happy tears that were socially acceptable at weddings, but something deeper, more complicated. Her hands gripped her program so tightly, the paper was crumpling at the edges. Was she thinking about her own wedding? We'd gotten married at a courthouse with 2 witnesses we'd pulled from the hallway. Sarah had wanted something bigger, something more. But I'd been between deployments with only a 72-hour window, and she'd said she understood. Said it didn't matter as long as we were together. Had it mattered? Had she spent the last 15 years resenting that courthouse, that rushed ceremony, that marriage that began with compromises she'd pretended were choices? The officiant, some friend of Gregory's father, another military man with enough credentials to fill a personnel file, began speaking about love and commitment and partnership. All the words people say at weddings, arranged in slightly different orders to create the illusion of uniqueness. I found my mind drifting. I thought about the last mission, the one I just returned from 3 weeks ago, the one that still woke me up at night with the sound of rotor blades and the smell of smoke and the weight of decisions that couldn't be unmade. They'd given me a medal for it, another piece of metal to add to the collection I kept in a locked box in the back of my closet, where Sarah would never accidentally find them and ask questions I couldn't answer. 3 men were alive because of what we'd done. 17 families would get to keep their husbands, their fathers, their sons. The mission had been classified as a success, written up in reports that would be buried in filing systems that most people didn't know existed. Success. But I could still see the face of the enemy fighter who'd almost made it through. Young, maybe 22, maybe younger, fighting for reasons I'd never fully understand, dying for beliefs I'd never shared. In his pocket, we'd found a photo of a woman and a child. Everyone's the hero of their own story. That's what they don't tell you in the recruitment videos. Do you, Gregory Michael Hartley, take Rebecca Lynn Morrison to be your lawfully wedded wife? The vows droned on. Gregory said yes with conviction. Rebecca said yes with perfection. They exchanged rings that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride. The kiss was long enough to be romantic, but short enough to be tasteful. The guests erupted in applause. The music swelled again. Rebecca and Gregory walked back down the aisle as a married couple, beaming at everyone who mattered, which was to say everyone except the people in the back rows. Well, that's done, Dorothy murmured beside me. Now comes the interesting part. The reception? The reality, she said. Weddings are theater. Marriages are life. One is much harder than the other. People began filing out, heading toward the reception hall, where dinner and dancing and more expensive champagne awaited. I waited, letting the crowd thin, in no particular hurry, to join the celebration. Sarah appeared in the aisle, moving against the flow of traffic to reach me. You actually stayed in the back, she said. Not quite an accusation, not quite gratitude. That's what was requested. David, she sighed, a sound that carried years of frustration. Can you just try, tonight, can you just try to be normal, sociable? I'm always normal. You know what I mean. Make conversation. Smile. Pretend you're happy to be here. I am happy to be here, I said, and it wasn't entirely a lie. I'm supporting you, supporting your family. My family who thinks you're a failure, she said quietly. And there it was, the truth we'd been dancing around for months, maybe years. My family who thinks I settled, who thinks I deserve better. Do you think that? I asked. She looked at me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine for something she either couldn't find or didn't want to see. I don't know what I think anymore, she said finally. I don't know what we are anymore, David. You're gone more than you're here. When you are here, you're somewhere else in your head, and I'm just tired. I'm tired of making excuses for you, tired of defending choices I'm not even sure were right. Sarah, we should go to the reception, she interrupted. Rebecca will notice if we're late. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me standing in the emptying ballroom with Dorothy, who had waited patiently through our exchange. Marriages are hard, Dorothy said simply, especially when people stop talking and start assuming. Is that wisdom from 40 years of teaching? No, that's wisdom from 43 years of being married to a man I loved but didn't always understand. She stood with some effort, leaning on her cane. The trick is remembering that understanding isn't the same as agreement. You can understand someone completely and still choose them. That's what commitment means. What if they don't choose you back? Then you have a different kind of problem, she said. Come on, let's go eat overpriced food and watch people dance badly. The reception hall was exactly what you'd expect from a wedding that cost more than a small house. Ice sculptures that would melt before the night was over, floral arrangements that would wilt before the weekend ended, tables set with china and crystal that would be used once and then packed away. Temporary beauty, carefully constructed, expensive to maintain. I found my seat table 17, near the back, of course. My table mates were distant relatives of someone, people who knew each other vaguely from other weddings, other funerals, other obligatory family gatherings. They made polite conversation about traffic and weather and how beautiful the ceremony had been. I nodded and smiled and said the right things at the right times, performing normalcy with the same precision I'd learned to perform other roles in other places. Sarah was at table 3, close to the head table, surrounded by her relatives who all looked at her with varying degrees of pity. Poor Sarah, married to that strange, quiet man who no one quite understood. Poor Sarah, stuck in a situation she couldn't escape without admitting failure. I wondered if she could hear their thoughts, if she agreed with them. The food came course after course of tiny, beautiful portions that were more art than sustenance. I ate mechanically, tasting nothing, while conversation swirled around me like water around a stone. Then, the toasts began. Gregory's best man went first, telling stories about their college years that were probably funnier if you'd been there. Rebecca's maid of honor followed, talking about Rebecca's dreams and ambitions and how Gregory was the perfect man to help her achieve them. Then, General Hartley stood. The room quieted immediately. Even people who didn't know who he was could sense the authority, the command presence that came from decades of leading soldiers in situations where leadership was the difference between life and death. I'm not much for long speeches, he began, his voice carrying easily through the room. I'm a soldier. We deal in actions, not words. But today, I'm making an exception for my son. He talked about Gregory's childhood, his accomplishments, his character. He talked about the importance of choosing a life partner wisely, of building a foundation that could withstand the storms that inevitably came. Marriage is like military service in one crucial way, he said. You don't know what you're truly capable of until you're tested, until you face something that challenges everything you thought you knew about yourself. The measure of a person, the measure of a marriage, is what you do when that test comes. His eyes swept the room, and for just a moment, they landed on me. There was a flicker of something recognition, curiosity, before he moved on. To Gregory and Rebecca, he concluded, raising his glass. May your tests make you stronger. May your challenges bring you closer. And may you always remember that the strongest positions are built on foundations no one can see. Everyone drank to that. The dancing began. Gregory and Rebecca performed their first dance, moving together with the kind of choreographed grace that comes from paying for lessons. Other couples joined them, parents with children, siblings with siblings, partners with partners. Sarah stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching. A cousin approached her, asked her to dance. She accepted, and they moved together in that polite, distant way people dance when they're being social rather than intimate. No one asked me. I didn't expect them to. I stepped outside onto the terrace, where the night air was cold enough to sting and quiet enough to breathe. The city spread out below, millions of lights representing millions of lives, all of them separate from mine, all of them unaware I existed. Needed some air too? I turned to find General Hartley standing nearby, a glass of scotch in his hand. Loud in there, I said simply. Weddings usually are. He joined me at the railing, looking out at the view. I meant what I said earlier. You have the bearing. Infantry? Among other things. Among other things, he repeated thoughtfully. The interesting answer. Where did you serve? Various places, mostly off the books. His eyebrows rose slightly. Off the books? Special operations? Something like that. Which unit? I hesitated. This was always the moment when I had to decide how much to reveal, how much to keep hidden, how much truth someone could handle. It's complicated, I said finally. Everything worthwhile is... He sipped his scotch. I've been in the Army for 32 years. Started as a second lieutenant right out of West Point. Worked my way up through the ranks. I've commanded units in 3 different wars. Overseen operations in places most people can't find on a map. I've met a lot of soldiers in that time. Good ones, bad ones, mediocre ones. But every now and then, I meet someone who's different. Someone who carries something in their eyes that can't be faked or taught. And, I said carefully, and you have that look, Mr. Chen. He turned to face me directly. You have the look of someone who's done things that don't make it into official reports. Things that happen in the spaces between what the public knows and what actually keeps them safe. Before I could respond, the terrace door burst open. Gregory stumbled out, his face flushed from champagne and excitement. Dad, there you are. They're about to cut the cake. We need. He stopped seeing me. Oh, sorry. Didn't mean to interrupt. Not interrupting, the general said smoothly. Just talking shop with David here. He's former military. Oh yeah? Gregory looked at me with polite disinterest. What did you do? Infantry. Mostly. Cool. Gregory was already turning back to his father. Anyway, the cake. Son, the general interrupted, something shifting in his tone. What's David's last name again? Chen, I said. David Chen. The general's expression changed, subtly, but unmistakably. His eyes widened slightly. His posture straightened even more than it already was. The hand holding the scotch glass froze halfway to his lips. Chen, he repeated slowly. David Chen. Army. Special Operations. Gregory looked between us, confused. Dad? What's wrong? The general set down his glass with careful precision. When he looked at me again, his expression was something I hadn't seen in years, something that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Recognition, not just recognition, understanding. Sir, he said quietly, and the single word carried weight that Gregory couldn't possibly comprehend. I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Ask. Operation Silent Thunder. 7 years ago, Yemen. The extraction that saved 3 CIA operatives and prevented a major intelligence breach. I said nothing. The official report says it was a joint task force operation, but there's another report, classified above top secret. That report has a name attached to it, a code name. Gregory was watching now, sensing something important was happening, but not understanding what. Dad, what are you talking about? The general ignored him, keeping his eyes locked on mine. They call him the Ghost, he said softly, because he operates in places that don't officially exist, doing things that officially never happened. Because he's never been captured, never been identified, never failed a mission. Because when something impossible needs to happen, when every other option has been exhausted, when lives are on the line and time is running out, he's the one they send. The silence on that terrace felt like physical pressure. Dad? Gregory's voice was uncertain now. Is this for real? General Hartley took a step forward, and then, in a movement that seemed to surprise even him, he came to attention and saluted. Sharp, precise, formal. Sir, he said, it's an honor to stand in your presence. For a long moment, I didn't move. The general stood there at attention, his salute crisp and unwavering, and I could see Gregory's mind trying to process what his eyes were witnessing. His father, a 2-star general who commanded thousands of soldiers, who advised presidents and senators, who walked through the Pentagon like he owned it, was saluting a man in a department store suit who'd been seated in the back row of his wedding. The city lights below us continued their indifferent blinking. Music from inside drifted through the glass doors, muffled but persistent. Somewhere in that ballroom, Sarah was probably looking for me, wondering where I'd disappeared to this time. At ease, General, I said quietly. He lowered his salute but didn't relax. Forgive me, sir. I didn't realize who you were. If I'd known, you weren't supposed to know, I interrupted. No one was. Dad, Gregory's voice cracked slightly. What the hell is going on? The general turned to his son, and I could see the internal calculation happening behind his eyes. How much to tell? How much was safe? How much his son could handle? Gregory, what I'm about to tell you is classified, he began. Do you understand what that means? Not classified in the sense that you shouldn't gossip about it at parties. Classified in the sense that knowing it carries legal obligations and potential consequences. Yes, sir. The general looked back at me. May I? I considered it. Once this particular cat was out of its particular bag, there was no putting it back. But then again, the cat had already shown its claws. The damage was done. Tell him what you need to tell him, I said. Nothing more. General Hartley nodded and turned back to Gregory. Your wedding guest here, your wife's brother-in-law, the man Rebecca insisted sit in the back row, is one of the most decorated and effective special operations officers in the history of the United States military. Gregory blinked. What? The operation I mentioned, Silent Thunder, that was just one of many. There are others, dozens of them. Operations that prevented terrorist attacks, rescued hostages, eliminated high-value targets, retrieved stolen nuclear material. Operations that, if they'd failed, would have changed the course of history. But he's just. Gregory trailed off, looking at me with new eyes. He's married to Sarah. Rebecca says he's a failure, that he can barely hold down a job. Because that's what he wants people to think, the general said. It's called a cover, a legend. The best operators are the ones no one recognizes, the ones who can walk through a room and be forgotten 5 minutes later. I listened to him explain my life to his son, and I felt something inside me shift. It wasn't pride. I'd stopped caring about pride years ago. It wasn't satisfaction at being revealed. If anything, it was exhaustion. This was the part no one prepared you for. They trained you to survive in hostile territory, to resist interrogation, to complete impossible missions with inadequate resources. But they never trained you for moments like this. For standing on a hotel terrace while someone explained to a confused groom that the nobody they dismissed was actually somebody after all. How do you know all this? Gregory asked. If it's so classified? Because I've read the reports, the general said. The ones that exist in secure facilities that require DNA verification to access. I've sat in briefing rooms where Joint Chiefs of Staff discussed operations they couldn't fully understand because the details were compartmentalized. And I've seen the results. Terrorist cells dismantled, weapons caches destroyed, lives saved, all attributed to Special Operations Forces with no names attached. He turned back to me. But there's a list. Not an official one. More like institutional knowledge. Passed between generals who've earned the right to know. Names of operators who've done the impossible so many times it stopped being coincidence and became reputation. Chen is on that list. Near the top. Near the top? Gregory's eyes were wide now. The champagne glow replaced by something like awe. Or maybe fear. The line between the two could be thin. There's a reason they call him the Ghost, the general continued. In 7 years of active operations in the most dangerous regions on Earth, he's never been identified by enemy forces. Never been captured, never failed a mission. There are foreign intelligence services that have files on him, well, files on someone they suspect exists, but no photos, no confirmed sightings, nothing concrete. He's a legend in the truest sense of the word. That's... Gregory looked at me like I'd suddenly materialized from nowhere. That's incredible. It's classified. I corrected, which means this conversation ends when we walk back inside. You don't tell Rebecca. You don't tell anyone. This stays between the three of us. But Rebecca should know, Gregory protested. She's been treating you like I want to be treated, I said firmly. Like the cover requires. If Rebecca knew, she'd treat me differently. People would notice. Word would spread. And suddenly, I'm not invisible anymore. I'm a target. My family becomes a target. Your family, Gregory repeated, and I could see the understanding dawning. Sarah doesn't know. You and inted my never meant clothes, you and ever meant clothes, you and ever meant clothes, you intentions. Sarah knows I was in the army. She knows I did some specialized work. She doesn't know the specifics, and it's better that way. Better? Gregory's voice rose slightly. She thinks you're a failure. She's miserable because she thinks she married someone who can't provide for her, who can't give her the life her sister has, I finished. I know, but the alternative is worse. The alternative is her knowing what I really do, what I've really done, and spending every deployment wondering if I'm going to come home. Wondering if the knock on the door is going to be notification officers telling her she's a widow, living with that fear, that uncertainty, that knowledge. Isn't that her choice to make? Gregory asked. The general placed a hand on his son's shoulder. It's more complicated than that. When you're cleared to know certain things, you become responsible for that knowledge. You can't unknow it, can't unsee it. It changes you. He looked at me with something like sympathy. I've been married twice, he said. The first marriage ended because of exactly what you're trying to prevent. My wife knew what I did. She knew the risks. And every time I deployed, every time I couldn't tell her where I was going or when I'd be back, it ate away at her, at us, until there was nothing left but worry and resentment and the constant weight of information she wished she didn't have. And the second marriage? I asked. Ended because I didn't tell her enough, he admitted. There's no perfect answer, Mr. Chen, just imperfect choices. We stood there, 3 men at different stages of understanding what it meant to carry secrets that could save lives or destroy them. We should go back inside, I said finally. They'll be wondering where the groom disappeared to. Right. Gregory ran a hand through his hair, still processing. Yeah, the cake. We need to cut the cake. He started toward the door, then paused and turned back. Thank you, he said, for your service, for what you do, for all of it. I nodded. What else was there to say? Gregory went inside, leaving me alone with the general. That was a risk, I said, telling him. He's my son, the general replied, and he's about to join a family that includes you. He deserved to know he's connected to something bigger than himself. He paused. But I am sorry for the revelation, for potentially compromising your operational security. That wasn't my intention. Operational security was compromised the moment I agreed to attend this wedding, I said. The moment I married Sarah. The moment I tried to have a normal life alongside the other one. Do you regret it? The marriage? I thought about Sarah, about the courthouse ceremony and the promises we'd made, about the first deployment after we got married, when she'd kissed me goodbye at the airport and told me to come back safe, about the gradual erosion of that hope into resignation, into something that looked like regret. I regret that she deserves better than what I can give her, I said. Better than half-truths and long absences and a husband who can't explain where he's been or what he's done. But I don't regret loving her, even if it wasn't enough. The general studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. The hardest missions aren't always the ones they give us. Sometimes they're the ones we give ourselves. We went back inside. The reception had progressed in our absence. The cake had been cut, Gregory must have rushed through it, and now sat in precise slices on plates being distributed by servers in white gloves. Dancing had intensified, as the champagne flowed more freely, and inhibitions lowered proportionally. I made my way back to table 17, where my table mates had given up on including me in conversation, and were now deeply engaged in discussing someone's recent cruise to Alaska. But something had changed. I could feel it in the way people looked at me as I passed. Not many, just a few. A colonel near the bar who'd been talking with General Hartley earlier. A woman in a midnight blue dress who had the bearing of someone accustomed to classified briefings. A few others scattered throughout the room. The general must have said something, or maybe they'd simply noticed his reaction on the terrace. Either way, knowledge was spreading like a stain through clear water. Sarah caught my eye from across the room. Her expression was puzzled. She'd noticed something was different, too, even if she couldn't identify what. I gave her a small smile, a slight nod. Everything's fine. She didn't look convinced. Rebecca was holding court at the head table, laughing at something one of Gregory's groomsmen had said. She looked radiant, triumphant, exactly as a bride should look on her wedding day. Gregory sat beside her, but his attention kept drifting. To his father, to me, back to his father. "Ladies and gentlemen," the DJ announced, "the bride and groom invite everyone to join them on the dance floor." More couples stood, moving toward the designated space. The music shifted into something upbeat and popular, the kind of song everyone knew the words to, even if they pretended they didn't. I stayed seated. Then General Hartley appeared beside me. "Mr. Chen," he said formally, "would you join me for a moment? There are some people I'd like you to meet." It wasn't really a question. I stood and followed him toward a quieter corner of the reception hall, where a small group had gathered. 3 men, 2 women, all of them with that particular alertness that marked career, military, or intelligence. "Gentlemen, ladies," the general said, "this is David Chen." "David, this is Colonel Patricia Morrison, Lieutenant Colonel James Webb, Commander Sarah Zhang, Major Robert Griffin, and Dr. Elizabeth Hart from DARPA." They each shook my hand, their grips firm, their eyes assessing. "The general's been telling us about your work," Colonel Morrison said. Her hair was steel gray, her bearing impeccable. "Impressive record." "The general is generous," I replied carefully. "The general is accurate," she countered. "I've read the Yemen report, the real one. What you pulled off there with minimal support and a compromised extraction point, that's textbook material now. They teach it at the War College." "They teach a sanitized version," I said, "without the parts that actually mattered. The parts where you made decisions in real time that most officers couldn't make with hours of planning." Lieutenant Colonel Webb added, "The parts where you improvised solutions that shouldn't have worked but did anyway." I didn't respond. What was there to say? Yes, I'd done those things. Yes, they'd worked. But every success in my line of work was just luck wearing the mask of skill. And eventually, everyone's luck ran out. "We were just discussing the situation in Kazakhstan," Dr. Hart said. She was younger than the others, maybe 40, with the intense focus of someone who spent their days solving problems that didn't have obvious solutions. "There's been some chatter about weapons-grade material potentially being moved through the region." "I wouldn't know anything about that," I said evenly. "Of course not," she agreed. But her eyes said she knew better. Hypothetically, though, if someone needed to track that material, prevent it from reaching certain parties, they'd need someone with specific skills. Someone who could operate in hostile territory without support. Someone with your particular expertise. "Hypothetically," I said, "that someone would already be committed elsewhere." "Committed to what?" Colonel Morrison asked. "If you don't mind my asking." "To figuring out how to salvage a marriage that's been slowly dying while I've been out saving strangers." The honesty surprised them. Hell, it surprised me. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, exactly. More like understanding. "That's the price, isn't it?" Commander Zhang said quietly. She was the youngest of the group, maybe early 30s. "We do the work that needs doing, and the people we love pay for it in ways they never agreed to." "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 3 years," Major Griffin added. "She's 14, doesn't understand why I miss her birthdays, her recitals, her life. Just knows that I'm never there." "My husband left me," Colonel Morrison said matter-of-factly. "Said he felt like he was married to a ghost." Ironic, really. We stood there, this small circle of people who understood the cost of choosing duty over everything else, choosing it again and again until there was nothing left to choose. Across the room, Sarah was dancing with one of her cousins. She was smiling, but it was the smile she used when she was performing happiness rather than feeling it. I'd learned to recognize the difference. "She doesn't know, does she?" Dr. Hart asked, following my gaze. "Your wife." "She knows enough to resent what I do," I said. "Not enough to understand why I do it." "Have you considered telling her?" "Every day," I admitted. "And every day I decide the truth would hurt more than the lie." General Hartley, who'd been listening quietly, spoke up. "I told Gregory tonight. On the terrace. He saw my reaction and I couldn't maintain the fiction. How did he take it? Colonel Morrison asked. He wanted to tell Rebecca immediately. Thought she should know her sister's husband isn't who she thinks he is. The general looked at me. I explained why that would be a mistake. Rebecca wouldn't keep it quiet, I said. She'd tell Sarah. She'd tell everyone. It would become her story, my brother-in-law is a war hero, and she'd use it to elevate her own status. The secret would be worthless within a week. Some secrets are meant to be worthless, Commander Zhang said. Maybe it's time to let this one go. And then what? I asked. I become the guy at family dinners that everyone wants to ask about classified operations. The curiosity at parties. The burden of knowing falls on everyone around me. The burden of not knowing is already on them, she pointed out. Your wife thinks you're failing. Your sister-in-law thinks you're worthless. They're carrying false information and it's poisoning their perception of you. Maybe the truth would be kinder. Before I could respond, a commotion near the head table drew our attention. Rebecca was standing, her face flushed, her voice rising above the music. Where is he? She was saying to Gregory. Where did your father take him? Gregory was trying to calm her down, but whatever he was saying wasn't working. It's my wedding, Rebecca continued, her voice carrying across the room. If there's some big important conversation happening, I should be part of it. I'm family too. The music died. Conversation stuttered to a halt. Everyone turned to watch the bride having what was clearly not a planned part of the evening's festivities. Sarah appeared beside Rebecca, placing a hand on her sister's arm. Becca, calm down. What's wrong? What's wrong? Rebecca pulled her arm away. What's wrong is that apparently David, your David, the one I told to sit in the back, is suddenly being treated like someone important by a 2-star general and half the military brass at this reception. The room had gone completely silent now. Sarah's eyes found mine across the space between us. In them, I saw confusion, hurt, and the dawning realization that there was something large and significant that she didn't understand. Someone, Rebecca said, her voice sharp enough to cut glass, needs to explain what the hell is going on. Right now. And just like that, the carefully constructed walls between my two lives began to crumble. Time has a strange quality in moments like these. Everything slows down and speeds up simultaneously. I could see individual faces turning toward us, curiosity morphing into interest, polite attention sharpening into genuine focus. I could hear the rustle of fabric as people shifted in their seats, the clink of glasses being set down, the collective intake of breath that happens when a crowd senses drama unfolding. And I could see Sarah's face, her expression cycling through confusion and hurt and something that might have been hope or might have been dread, and I realized that whatever happened next, whatever words were spoken in this overpriced ballroom with its crystal chandelier and its carefully arranged flowers, nothing would ever be quite the same again. General Hartley moved first. He crossed the room with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to walking into tense situations and taking control. People parted for him instinctively, creating a path from where I stood to where Rebecca and Sarah waited near the head table. Mrs. Hartley, he said, addressing Rebecca with formal courtesy, I apologize for any disruption to your celebration. That was never my intention. Then what was your intention? Rebecca demanded. Her wedding-perfect composure was cracking at the edges. Why is everyone suddenly interested in my sister's husband? What aren't you telling me? The general glanced at me. I gave him a slight nod. The secret was already bleeding out. Better to control the hemorrhage than let it spray everywhere unchecked. Perhaps, the general said carefully, this is a conversation best had in private. No, Rebecca's voice rang out clear and sharp. No more private conversations. No more secrets. If there's something about David that everyone here seems to know except his own family, then we deserve to hear it. Now, here. Sarah was staring at me now, her eyes wide and uncertain. David, what is she talking about? I walked toward them, each step feeling heavier than the last. The crowd opened for me too, but their expressions were different than they'd been when the general passed. Some knew, others suspected. Most were simply curious about what kind of secret could turn a back row nobody into the center of attention at a wedding. "Sarah," I began, but she cut me off. "Don't." Her voice was quiet but firm. "Don't give me the careful explanation. Don't manage me. Just tell me the truth. For once, just tell me the truth. For once." Those two words carried the weight of 15 years of half-answers and vague explanations in conversations that ended with, "I can't talk about that." I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, underneath the layers of resentment and disappointment we'd built together. She deserved the truth. She'd always deserved it. "I'm not who you think I am," I said simply. "That's not an answer," Rebecca snapped. "That's a dramatic non-statement. What does that even mean?" But Sarah understood. I could see it in her eyes, the pieces starting to connect, the pattern emerging from what had seemed like random dots. "The Army," she said slowly. "Your service. You told me you did specialized work in various capacities. That wasn't the whole truth, was it?" "No," I admitted. "It wasn't." General Hartley stepped forward again, and I could see him making a decision weighing operational security against human decency, classified protocols against basic honesty. "Your husband," he said, addressing Sarah directly, "is one of the most accomplished special operations officers in the history of the United States military. He has conducted missions that prevented terrorist attacks, rescued hostages, and eliminated threats to national security, missions that remain classified at the highest levels." The room erupted in whispers. Sarah's face had gone pale. "What?" "He's being too modest," Colonel Morrison added, stepping forward from the group I'd been speaking with. "Mr. Chen isn't just accomplished, he's exceptional. In our community, he has a reputation. They call him—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Please." But Morrison continued anyway, her voice carrying the weight of authority. "They call him the Ghost, because he operates in places that don't officially exist, doing things that officially never happened. Because in 7 years of active deployment in the most hostile environments on Earth, he's never been captured, never been compromised, never failed." "That's impossible," Rebecca said, but her voice had lost its edge. Uncertainty had crept in. "It should be impossible." Lieutenant Colonel Webb agreed. "That's what makes it remarkable." Sarah was shaking her head slowly, like she could physically reject the information. No, that doesn't make sense. David works in. He said he does consulting. Security consulting. That's his cover," the general explained gently. "The legend he maintains for operational security. It's designed to be boring, forgettable, unremarkable. It's designed to make people not ask questions." "It's designed to make people think he's a failure," Rebecca said quietly, and for the first time that night, she wasn't sneering, she was realizing. "Yes," I said, looking at her directly. "That's exactly what it's designed to do." Sarah's hands were trembling. She clasped them together, trying to still them. "How long?" "Since before we met," I said. "Since I was 23 years old." 15 years. Her voice was barely above a whisper. 15 years of lying to me. "Not lying," I said. "Protecting you." "From what?" she demanded, her voice rising. "From the truth? From knowing that my husband is apparently some kind of, what? Super soldier? Secret agent? From knowing that every time I deployed, there was a significant chance I wouldn't come back," I said quietly. "From lying awake at night, wondering if the knock on the door would be notification officers. From carrying the weight of classified information that you couldn't share, couldn't process, couldn't unknow. That should have been my choice." Sarah's eyes were bright with tears now. "You should have let me choose whether I could handle it, not decided for me like I was a child." "You're right," I said, and I meant it. "You're absolutely right. I made a choice that affected both of us, and I made it alone. I thought I was protecting you. Maybe I was just protecting myself." The silence that followed was different than the ones before. This one felt like something breaking. Gregory had appeared beside Rebecca, his hand on her arm. He looked stricken, caught between loyalty to his new wife and whatever he'd learned on that terrace. "Becca," he said softly. You need to hear this." "Hear what?" She turned to him, her perfect wedding makeup starting to streak. "That I've been cruel to someone who apparently deserves respect? That I've spent years mocking and belittling a war hero? Is that what I need to hear?" "You didn't know," Gregory said. "I didn't want to know," Rebecca corrected, her voice cracking. "I didn't want to see anything good in him because it was easier to feel superior. Easier to judge Sarah's choices if I could convince myself she'd married beneath her." She looked at me then, and I saw something I'd never seen before in Rebecca's eyes. Shame. "I told you to sit in the back," she said. "At my wedding. I told you to stay out of the photos because you'd be difficult to explain." "You did," I confirmed. "And you just accepted it, didn't argue, didn't defend yourself, didn't tell me to go to hell, which is what I deserved." "It's easier to be underestimated," I said. "People reveal their true selves when they think you're not important enough to perform for." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Rebecca's composure finally shattered. She turned away, one hand covering her mouth, and Gregory pulled her close. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs that had nothing to do with happiness and everything to do with realizing you've been fundamentally wrong about something important. But it was Sarah I couldn't look away from. She stood there, her arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to hold something together that was already falling apart. Her eyes moved from me to the general, to Colonel Morrison, to the other military personnel who'd gathered, as if she could find answers in their faces that I hadn't given her. "Say something," I said quietly. "Please, what do you want me to say?" Her voice was hollow. "That I understand? I don't. That I forgive you? I can't. Not yet. Maybe not ever." "That's fair." "Fair?" She laughed, but it was a broken sound. "Nothing about this is fair, David. You let me think you were failing. Let me think. Our marriage was struggling because you couldn't provide, couldn't be the partner I needed. Do you know how many nights I cried because I thought I'd made a mistake marrying you? Each word was a blade. Do you know how many times I defended you to my family, to my friends, to Rebecca?" She gestured at her sister. "How many times I made excuses for why you were never around, why we couldn't afford nice things, why you seemed so distant and disconnected." "I know," I said. "I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough." The tears were falling now, tracking mascara down her cheeks. "Sorry doesn't give me back 15 years of thinking I wasn't enough, for you to try harder, to be better, to succeed. Sorry doesn't undo the damage of thinking the man I loved didn't love me enough to fight for our life together." "I was fighting," I said. "Just not in the way you knew about." "Fighting who? Fighting what? For what?" She shook her head violently. "You're standing here telling me you've been out saving the world, preventing terrorist attacks, being a hero, and that's supposed to make it better? That's supposed to make up for missing our anniversary because you were deployed somewhere you couldn't tell me about? For coming home with bruises you said were from the gym? For looking at me like you didn't even see me because you were still seeing whatever horror you'd witnessed overseas?" The room had gone completely silent. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This was witnessing something private and painful unfolding in public. "Sarah," General Hartley said gently, "perhaps this conversation should continue somewhere more private." "Why?" Sarah turned on him, her grief transmuting into anger. "Why does everything have to be private? Why does everything have to be secret? He spent our entire marriage hiding who he is, what he does, what he's capable of. Why should I hide how that feels?" The general had no answer for that. Sarah looked back at me, and I saw something shift in her expression, something hardening. "When you deployed 3 months ago," she said, her voice steadying, "you told me it was a consulting job in Dubai. 2 weeks, you said. You came back after 5. You had a scar on your shoulder, new, fresh, and you said you'd slipped in the hotel shower." I remembered that deployment. Yemen, not Dubai. An extraction that had gone sideways when our intelligence proved incomplete. We'd gotten the target out, but it had cost us. The scar on my shoulder was from a bullet that had come close enough to graze, but not close enough to stop me. "That wasn't a consulting job," Sarah said. "It wasn't a question. No. And the scar wasn't from a shower. No. You almost died, didn't you? Whatever you were really doing, something went wrong and you almost died. I hesitated. The truth was complicated. Yes, I'd been in danger. Yes, the mission had been compromised. But I'd also made choices that increased the risk because the alternative was leaving 3 people behind to die. The mission was successful, I said carefully. Everyone came home. That's not what I asked. Yes, I admitted. There was a moment when the outcome was uncertain. Sarah closed her eyes. When she opened them again, they were dry. The tears had stopped, replaced by something colder and more final. I need you to understand something, she said quietly. I fell in love with you because you were kind, because you were quiet and thoughtful, and made me feel safe. Because when you looked at me, I felt seen. I still see you, I said. No, she shook her head. You see who I was 15 years ago. You see the woman who said she understood when you had to leave for weeks at a time, who said she didn't need expensive things or fancy vacations, who said she just wanted you to come home safe. That's still who you are. No, David. That's who I had to become to survive being married to you. That's who I convinced myself to be, because the alternative was admitting I'd made a terrible mistake. She took a shaky breath. I don't know who I actually am anymore. I don't know what I actually want, because I've spent so long adapting to you, to your absences, to your secrets, that I've forgotten how to exist without them. The words landed like artillery. Rebecca had stopped crying. She stood beside Gregory, watching her sister with an expression of dawning understanding. You're leaving him, Rebecca said softly. It wasn't a question. Sarah didn't respond immediately. She stood there, in her expensive dress at her sister's wedding, surrounded by people who'd just learned that everything they thought they knew was wrong. I don't know, she said finally. I don't know anything right now, except that I can't be here. I can't stand in this room with all these people looking at us, looking at him, seeing a hero, while I'm seeing 15 years of lies. Sarah, I started. Don't, she interrupted. Please, just don't. Not now, not here. She turned and walked toward the exit, her heels clicking against the marble floor. The crowd parted for her like water around stone. I didn't follow. What would be the point? She needed space, time, distance, from the revelation that had just upended her understanding of her own life. Rebecca watched her sister leave, then looked back at me. I'm sorry, she said. And I could hear that she meant it. For everything. For how I treated you. For what I said. For not seeing. You saw exactly what I wanted you to see, I said. This isn't your fault. Then whose fault is it? I looked at the general, at the other officers, at Gregory standing uncertain beside his bride, at the wedding guests who were slowly starting to whisper among themselves, processing what they'd witnessed. Mine, I said simply. All mine. General Hartley approached me, his expression grave. Mr. Chen, I owe you an apology. I should have been more discreet. I should have. You did what you thought was right, I interrupted. What's done is done. What will you do now? I thought about Sarah, probably in a taxi by now, heading back to our small apartment with its second-hand furniture and its walls that held 15 years of secrets. I thought about the career that had defined me, shaped me, maybe destroyed me. I thought about all the missions still waiting, all the threats still lurking, all the reasons I'd spent my life being someone other than myself. I'm going to give her what she needs, I said quietly. Space, truth, and probably a divorce. Rebecca made a small sound of distress, but I kept talking. And then I'm gonna figure out who I am when I'm not being the ghost. The words felt like surrender and liberation in equal measure. The chandelier above us continued to sparkle, oblivious to the drama unfolding beneath it. The wedding playlist had resumed. Someone had decided the show must go on. Couples were returning to the dance floor. Conversations were restarting. Normalcy was attempting to reassert itself. But everything had changed. The cover was blown. The marriage was broken. The carefully constructed life I'd built was crumbling. And somewhere in the ruins, I'd have to find a way to be just David Chen. Not the ghost, not the legend, not the operator who existed in classified files and whispered conversations. Just a man who'd made choices and now had to live with the consequences. I left the reception an hour later, after the dancing had resumed and the scandal had been absorbed into the wedding's narrative like a stone thrown into water, initial ripples giving way to surface calm, even as everything underneath remained disturbed. General Hartley had pulled me aside one more time before I left. "Where will you go?" he'd asked. "Home," I'd said, "to see what's left of it." He'd nodded, understanding in his eyes. "For what it's worth, you did the right thing, letting the truth out. Secrets like that, they don't preserve relationships. They just preserve the illusion of them." "The illusion was all we had left," I'd replied. Now I stood outside our apartment building, looking up at the windows on the 4th floor. The lights were on. Sarah was home. I could see her shadow moving behind the curtains, pacing, probably, trying to process everything that had been dropped on her like a bomb with a 15-year delayed fuse. The night air was cold enough to see my breath. January in the city had a particular quality to it, the kind of cold that wasn't dramatic like a blizzard, just persistent and gray and exhausting. The kind that wore you down over time, rather than all at once. I thought about staying outside, giving her more time, coming back tomorrow, when the shock had dulled into something more manageable. But I'd spent 15 years giving her half-truths and careful omissions. The least I could do now was show up. The elevator ride to the 4th floor felt longer than insertions into hostile territory. At least in combat zones, you knew what you were walking into. You'd studied the terrain, reviewed intelligence, prepared contingencies. This was walking into unknown territory, with no intel and no extraction plan. I unlocked the door quietly. The apartment was exactly as we'd left it that morning a lifetime ago, when the biggest problem had been whether my suit was appropriate for a high society wedding. Sarah sat on the couch, still in her burgundy dress, her shoes kicked off beside her. She had a glass of wine in one hand and her phone in the other. When I entered, she looked up, and I could see she'd been crying again. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her makeup smeared. "I Googled you," she said without preamble. I closed the door behind me. "What did you find?" "Nothing." She laughed, but it was bitter. "Absolutely nothing. No social media presence, no professional profiles, no news articles. It's like you barely exist online. I found a David Chen who's a dentist in Oregon, another who's a software engineer in California, a professor at MIT. But you? Nothing." "That's intentional," I said. "Everything about you is intentional, isn't it?" She set down her phone. "Every word you say, every answer you give, every version of yourself you present, it's all calculated, all controlled." I stayed near the door, giving her space. "It has to be." "Why?" She stood, unsteady slightly. The wine wasn't her first glass. "I've been sitting here trying to understand, trying to make it make sense. Why couldn't you trust me? Why couldn't you just tell me the truth?" "Because the truth is dangerous," I said. "Knowing what I do, what I've done, it makes you a target. It makes you complicit. It puts you at risk in ways you can't prepare for." "So you decided for me," she said. "You decided I was too weak, too fragile, too whatever to handle it." "I decided you deserved a normal life," I corrected. "A life where you didn't wake up every morning wondering if your husband was dead. A life where you could go to weddings and parties and family dinners without carrying classified information. A life where you could be angry at me for missing our anniversary without wondering if I missed it because I was preventing a terrorist attack." "But I was angry anyway," her voice cracked. "I was angry and hurt and confused because I didn't understand. At least if I'd known the truth, the anger would have made sense. At least I could have been angry at the situation instead of at you, at us." She was right. Of course she was right. I moved into the room slowly, like approaching something fragile. What do you want from me now? Truth? Explanations? An apology? I want to understand who I married, Sarah said. I want to know who you really are underneath all the covers and legends and operational security. I want to know if the man I fell in love with even exists, or if he was just another role you were playing. The question cut deeper than any interrogation I'd ever endured. I sat down in the armchair across from the couch, our usual positions when we had the rare conversations that actually mattered. The furniture in this apartment was old, worn, deliberately unremarkable. The kind of furniture that said struggling couple making it work, rather than special operations officer with access to classified funding. The man you fell in love with is real, I said quietly. That part was never a performance. The quiet guy who liked bookstores and old movies, and making you breakfast on Sundays, that's me. That's always been me. But it's not all of you. No, I admitted, it's not all of me. Sarah sat back down, pulling her knees up to her chest like she was trying to make herself smaller. Tell me about the other parts, the parts I don't know, where to even begin. I was recruited when I was 21, I said. Junior year of college, ROTC. I scored well on certain aptitude tests, problem solving, under pressure, spatial reasoning, psychological resilience. A man approached me after a training exercise and asked if I'd be interested in specialized opportunities. And you said yes. I said I'd listen. They flew me to a facility I can't name and spent 3 days evaluating me. Physical tests, psychological assessments, scenario simulations. At the end, they told me I had a gift for a particular kind of work, the kind that required operating independently in hostile environments with minimal support. Sarah was listening intently now, her wine glass forgotten on the side table. They offered me training, I continued. 2 years of it. Languages, close quarters combat, intelligence gathering, survival skills, how to disappear, how to improvise, how to make split-second decisions when lives are at stake and backup is impossible. And you took it. I was 21, I said. I thought it sounded like the most important thing I could do with my life, serving my country in a way that actually mattered, being part of something bigger than myself. When did we meet? She asked. In this timeline, 6 months after I finished training. My first posting was stateside. They were still evaluating me, making sure I could handle the work. I had downtime. I went to that coffee shop near campus where you were studying for your master's exams. A ghost of a smile crossed her face. You spilled coffee on my biochemistry textbook. I was distracted, I said. You were the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I was trying to figure out how to start a conversation. So you assaulted my textbook. It seemed like a good strategy at the time. The moment of levity passed quickly, reality reasserting itself. Why didn't you tell me then? Sarah asked. When we started dating? Before I fell in love with you? Because I wasn't supposed to tell anyone, I said, and because I didn't think it would last. I thought you'd realize I was gone too much, that the relationship was too hard, that you deserved someone more available. I thought it would end naturally before it became complicated, but it didn't end. No, you stayed, even when I deployed for weeks at a time, even when I couldn't explain where I was going or what I was doing. You stayed, and I couldn't figure out why. Because I loved you, Sarah said simply. Because even with all the absences and the mysteries, when you were there, you were completely there, present in a way most people never are. It felt like you saw me, really saw me, in a way no one else ever had. I did see you, I said. I do see you, but I never saw you, she countered. Not all of you. How many times have you deployed? How many missions? I did the mental math. 47 confirmed deployments over 15 years. Some lasted days. Others lasted months. The missions themselves, hundreds. Most were intelligence gathering. Some were extractions. A few were direct action operations. Direct action, she repeated. That's military speak. For what exactly? I hesitated. This was the line I'd never crossed. The place where explanation became revelation, where context became confession. Eliminating threats, I said carefully. High-value targets. People who posed immediate danger to American lives or interests. You killed people. Not a question. A statement seeking confirmation. Yes. The word hung in the air between us. Sarah drew a shaky breath. How many? Does it matter? Yes, she said firmly. If I'm trying to understand who you are, if I'm trying to reconcile the man who makes me breakfast with the man who apparently has a legendary reputation in the military, yes, it matters. I looked at my hands. They were steady, unremarkable. You'd never know what they'd done just by looking at them. I don't have an exact count, I said. In some operations, you're part of a team, and you can't always attribute specific outcomes to specific individuals. But confirmed, probably somewhere between 40 and 50. I watched her process that number, watched her try to fit it into her understanding of me, of us, of the 15 years we'd spent together. Were they all bad people? She asked quietly. The ones you eliminated? Define bad, I said. They were threats. They were planning attacks, coordinating terrorist cells, running weapons, orchestrating kidnappings. They were people who, if left alive, would have killed innocent civilians. Does that make them bad? Or does it just make them enemy combatants in an undeclared war? You sound uncertain. I am uncertain, I admitted. Every time. Before, during, after. I'm uncertain if there was another way, if the intelligence was accurate, if the order was just. But then I think about the embassy bombing that didn't happen because we took out the coordinator, the school bus that didn't explode because we intercepted the weapons, the hostages who made it home because we extracted them before they could be executed. You think about the lives you saved. I think about the lives I took. I corrected. The lives I saved are just how I live with it. Sarah was quiet for a long time. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, ambulance or police, the standard soundtrack of city life. Inside, our small apartment felt like the only quiet place in the world. The scar on your shoulder, she said finally. The one from 3 months ago. What really happened? I pulled off my jacket, then unbuttoned my shirt, enough to expose the scar. It was still pink, still healing. A line about 4 inches long where the bullet had carved through skin and muscle but miraculously missed anything vital. Sarah stood and crossed to me, her fingers reaching out to trace the scar's path. Yemen, I said. We were extracting 3 CIA operatives whose cover had been blown. The intelligence was bad. We thought we'd have a clear window, but enemy forces were already converging on the safe house. We had to fight our way out. The bullet? Sniper on a rooftop. He got 1 shot off before my spotter took him out. If I'd been standing 6 inches to the left, it would have hit my heart. Her fingers trembled against my skin. You could have died. Yes. And you came home and told me you slipped in a shower. The alternative was telling you I almost died and watching you realize that every deployment could end with notification officers at your door. I thought I was sparing you that fear. You were sparing yourself, Sarah said, pulling her hand back. You were sparing yourself from seeing my fear, from dealing with my worry, from having to face what you were putting me through every time you left. She was right again. When had Sarah become so perceptive? Or had she always been this way, and I'd just been too focused on operational security to notice? I'm sorry, I said, for lying, for the half-truths, for thinking I knew what was best for you better than you knew for yourself. Are you sorry for the work? She asked. For the deployments, the missions, the life you chose? I thought about the 3 CIA operatives from Yemen. They'd made it home to their families because of what we'd done. I thought about the embassy in Nairobi that still stood because we'd stopped the truck bomb, the school in Afghanistan where girls could still learn because we'd eliminated the Taliban cell planning to destroy it. No, I said honestly. I'm not sorry for the work. I'm sorry for the cost. I'm sorry that doing what I thought was right meant hurting you. But the work itself, the missions, the operations, I believe they mattered. I believe they saved lives. Even if they destroyed ours? The question was a bullet I couldn't dodge. I don't know, I said. I thought I could have both. A mission that mattered and a life that mattered. A marriage that worked alongside a career that required absolute commitment. Maybe that was naive. Maybe it was selfish. Maybe it was always going to end this way. Sarah returned to the couch, picking up her wine glass and taking a long drink. Rebecca called me, she said, while you were on your way home. She apologized. Actually apologized, which might be a first in the history of our relationship. For what? For everything. For treating you like you were beneath us. For making me doubt my own choices. For being so focused on appearances and status that she couldn't see what actually mattered. Sarah smiled sadly. She said I married the most interesting man at her wedding, and she was too shallow to realize it. Rebecca's had a shocking night, I said. Give her a week, and she'll probably go back to normal. Maybe. Or maybe tonight changed things for her too. Seeing her perfect wedding interrupted by something real. Something that mattered more than flower arrangements and seating charts. We sat in silence for a while, the weight of 15 years of secrets settling around us like dust. What happens now? I asked finally. Sarah looked at me with eyes that had seen too much truth too quickly. I don't know. I love you, David. I've always loved you. But I don't know if love is enough to fix this. I don't know if we can come back from 15 years of you being someone else. I've always been me, I said. The man you married is the man sitting here now. But he's also the ghost, she said. And I don't know him at all. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out, glanced at the screen. Encrypted message. Priority alert. Sarah saw my expression change. Work? Probably. Are you going to check it? This was the test. The moment that would define what came next. I held her gaze and powered off the phone. No, I said. Right now, I'm here. With you. Everything else can wait. Her eyes filled with tears again, but this time they looked different. Less like grief and more like something that might have been hope. That's the first time, she said softly. In 15 years, that's the first time you've chosen me over the mission. Then I've been failing at the wrong thing, I said. I thought I was failing at being normal. Turns out I was just failing at being your husband. She set down her wine glass and crossed to where I sat. She didn't touch me, but she was close enough that I could smell her perfume, the same scent she'd worn since we met, familiar and heartbreaking. I need time, she said. I need to think, to process, to figure out if I can live with all of this, the truth, the danger, the knowing. But I need you to promise me something, anything. No more secrets, she said. No more lies, even small ones. No more deciding what I can or can't handle. If we're going to try to fix this, it has to be based on honesty. Complete honesty. Can you do that? Could I? Could I tell her about the nightmares that woke me up at 3 a.m.? The faces I saw when I closed my eyes? The missions that haunted me, not because they went wrong, but because they went right? Could I share the weight I'd been carrying alone for so long? I can try, I said. I don't know if I'll be good at it. I've spent 15 years building walls. Taking them down won't be easy. Nothing worth doing is easy, Sarah said. She kissed my forehead, a gesture that felt like both goodbye and hello, and walked toward the bedroom. I'm going to sleep, she said. You should too. Tomorrow we'll talk more. Really talk. About everything. She closed the bedroom door, leaving me alone in the living room with my powered-off phone and my uncertain future. I looked around our small apartment at the second-hand furniture and the wedding photos on the wall, at the life we'd built on foundations of sand. Maybe it was time to build something stronger. Or maybe it was already too late. Only tomorrow would tell. I didn't sleep. Instead, I sat in the armchair as the night deepened around me, watching the city lights through our window, scattered points of illumination in the darkness, each one representing a life I'd never know, problems I'd never solve, secrets I'd never keep. Around 3 a.m., my phone, still powered off, began to vibrate insistently on the coffee table. Someone was calling repeatedly. The encryption protocol meant it could only be work, could only be important. I left it off. At 4 a.m., I heard Sarah moving in the bedroom. Footsteps crossing to the bathroom. Water running. the soft sound of crying that she probably thought I couldn't hear through the walls. At 5 a.m., the sun started its slow climb over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gray and pink that reminded me of smoke and blood and all the dawns I'd watched in places where beauty and violence existed in the same breath. At 6 a.m., the bedroom door opened. Sarah emerged wearing one of my old army t-shirts, the few pieces of authentic military gear I kept around, so worn and faded that they looked like civilian clothes. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, her face bare of makeup, her eyes still carrying the weight of yesterday's revelations. She looked more like the woman I'd met 15 years ago than she had in a long time. "You didn't sleep," she observed, moving toward the kitchen. "No." "Did you check your phone?" "No." She filled the kettle with water, her movements automatic, practiced. We'd made coffee together thousands of mornings. This one felt different. Like we were strangers learning each other's rhythms for the first time. "They're probably worried," she said. "Your people, whoever they are. They'll adapt," I said. "They always do." The kettle began to heat, filling the silence with its low rumble. Sarah pulled out 2 mugs, hers with a chip on the rim that she refused to replace, mine plain and white and unremarkable. "Tell me about your first mission," she said suddenly. "The real first one. Where you actually deployed." I thought back to that operation. It felt like a lifetime ago, like it had happened to someone else. "Somalia," I said. 8 years ago. There was a cargo ship that had been taken by pirates. They were holding the crew hostage, demanding ransom. Standard piracy situation, except intelligence suggested they were actually working for Al-Shabaab and planned to use the ship to transport weapons. Sarah brought the coffee over, handed me my mug, settled onto the couch. "What was your role?" "Reconnaissance initially. I went in undercover as a maritime insurance investigator. Spent 3 days in Mogadishu, meeting with local officials, gathering intelligence, mapping the pirates' network. And then we learned they were planning to execute the crew in 48 hours if the ransom wasn't paid. The official government channels couldn't move fast enough. A traditional military assault would have gotten hostages killed, so they sent me in. The coffee was too hot to drink, but I held the mug anyway, feeling the heat against my palms. I infiltrated the ship at night, swam from a position 2 miles out, climbed aboard while the guards were changing shifts, spent 6 hours hidden in the cargo hold, waiting for the right moment. "Alone?" Sarah's voice was quiet. "Alone," I confirmed. "That's how most of my operations work. Teams are for conventional military action. What I do requires a different approach." "What happened?" "I neutralized the guards one by one. Silent takedowns, no gunfire. Then I freed the crew and signaled for extraction. A SEAL team was waiting offshore. They came in, secured the ship, and got everyone out. The whole operation took 17 minutes from my signal to evacuation." "How many guards?" "7. Sarah was quiet, processing. "Neutralized. That means you killed them." "Yes." "All of them?" "6. The 7th I incapacitated and zip-tied. He wasn't armed when I reached him, and he was young, maybe 19. I made a judgment call." "What happened to him?" "He was taken into custody, interrogated, and eventually released. Last I heard, he'd left the piracy business and was working at his uncle's restaurant in Kismayo." A small smile touched Sarah's lips. "You kept track of him?" "I keep track of most of them," I admitted. "The ones who survive, the ones I chose to spare. I need to know if the choice was right, if the mercy was warranted. And was it? With the 19-year-old pirate? He hasn't returned to criminal activity. He got married, had a daughter, so yes, I think it was right." Sarah sipped her coffee, her eyes distant. "That's not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone more callous, I guess. Someone who could kill people and not think about them afterward. Someone who treated it like a job rather than a moral calculation." "It is a job," I said. "But every job has ethics. Even this one. Especially this one." The morning light was stronger now, spilling through the window and illuminating the dust motes floating in the air. Everything looked sharper, clearer, more real than it had in the darkness. "When you're gone," Sarah said slowly. "When you're on deployment, what do you think about?" "The mission," I said automatically, then stopped. "No, that's the answer I'm supposed to give. The truth? I think about you. About this apartment. About whether you're okay, whether you're happy, whether I'm destroying us slowly by choosing this life over the one we could have had. What life could we have had?" "Normal," I said. "A house in the suburbs. Kids maybe. Me with a regular job teaching, consulting, something that didn't require classified clearance and encrypted communications. You doing your research without worrying about whether I'd come home." "Do you want that life?" Sarah asked. "Really want it?" "Why?" I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not just giving the answer that would smooth things over or make her feel better. "I don't know," I said honestly. "The work I do, it feels necessary. Like if I'm not doing it, someone else will have to. Someone who might not make the same choices, who might not bring the same judgment to impossible situations." Is that arrogance? Probably. But it's also what keeps me going back. Even knowing it's destroying us? To we.com. "I thought I could manage both," I said. "I thought if I compartmentalized enough, if I kept the world separate, I could have the mission and have you." I was wrong. Sarah set down her coffee and pulled her knees up to her chest again, her defensive position I'd learned. The posture she assumed when she was trying to protect herself from hurt. "My mother called last night," she said, "after I got home. Someone from the wedding had already told her what happened. She wanted to know if it was true, if you were really some kind of secret operative." "What did you tell her?" "I told her I was still figuring that out myself." Sarah's smile was sad. She said she always knew there was something off about you, something that didn't quite add up. She thought you were either involved in something illegal or you were just monumentally unmotivated. Turns out she was half right. There was something that didn't add up. "I'm sorry," I said, "for putting you in that position, for making you defend choices you didn't fully understand." "Stop apologizing," Sarah said, but there was no anger in it. "I'm tired of apologies. I want understanding. I want to know how we got here, and whether there's a way forward." "Is there?" I asked. "A way forward? A way forward?" She looked at me for a long moment, her expression unreadable. "I don't know yet," she said finally. "But I think I need to see it. Your other life. The parts you've kept hidden. I need to understand the whole picture before I can decide if I can live with it." "That's not possible," I said immediately. "The operational security." "I'm not asking to sit in on classified briefings," she interrupted. "I'm asking to see where you go when you're not here, to meet the people you work with, to understand the context of the choices you've made. Can you do that? Can you show me that part of yourself?" It was a reasonable request. It was also potentially catastrophic from a security standpoint. "I'd need permission," I said, "from my superiors. They'd have to approve bringing you into certain spaces, letting you see certain things, and even then, there would be limits. Things I still couldn't show you, places you couldn't go, but some things you could show me? Maybe, probably. I'd have to ask." Sarah nodded slowly, then asked, "Because I meant what I said last night, no more secrets. If we're going to try to fix this, I need to know who I'm fixing it with. All of who you are. Not just the version that fits in this apartment." My phone buzzed again on the coffee table. Still off, but the vibrations indicated multiple missed calls, multiple messages waiting. "You should check that," Sarah said. "It might be important. You're important." "David." Her voice was firm. "Check the phone. We can't build a new foundation if you're ignoring your responsibilities. That's just a different kind of lie. Brainry. I know that. Please for. I'm in life." She was right. Again. When had she become so wise about things I'd spent years trying to rationalize? I picked up the phone and powered it on. The screen immediately flooded with notifications. 7 missed calls from General Hartley. 4 encrypted messages from my handler. 2 alerts from the operations center. and one text from a number I didn't recognize. "Mr. Chen, this is Rebecca. I need to talk to you. Please call when you can." I stared at that last message, surprised. Rebecca had never contacted me directly before. Every interaction had been filtered through Sarah, or relegated to obligatory family gatherings. "What is it?" Sarah asked, reading my expression. "Your sister wants to talk to me." "About what?" "She didn't say." I showed her the message. Sarah's eyebrows rose. "That's unexpected. Are you going to call her?" "After I deal with the work messages," I said. "Priority order." I opened the encrypted message from my handler first. It was brief, as these messages always were. Silent Thunder Principals requesting debrief. Cover potentially compromised by wedding incident. Need you on site as soon as possible. Acknowledge receipt. Silent Thunder. The Yemen operation. The one General Hartley had mentioned at the wedding. The one that had apparently started this entire cascade of revelations. I typed a quick response. Acknowledged. Can meet this afternoon. Location. The response came back almost immediately. Facility 7. 1,400 hours. Come alone. I looked at Sarah. I have a meeting at 2 p.m. They want to discuss the security implications of what happened at the wedding. "Am I the security implication?" she asked. "We both are," I said. The fact that my identity was revealed to a room full of people, some of whom have connections to foreign governments or defense contractors, it creates exposure, risk. Are we in danger? The question was direct, practical. It reminded me of why I'd fallen in love with her. Sarah didn't panic. She assessed, adapted, responded. "I don't think so," I said carefully. The people at that wedding were mostly American military and civilian leadership. The risk isn't physical threat, it's information spread. Rumors getting back to the wrong ears. My face and name being connected to operations that are supposed to remain anonymous. What will they do? Probably reassign me. Put me on desk duty for a while until they assess the damage. Maybe retire the ghost persona entirely and create a new one. Or maybe they'll decide I'm too compromised and push me toward retirement. I said it casually, but Sarah heard the weight underneath. "You don't want to retire," she said. "I don't know what I want," I admitted. A week ago, I would have said I wanted to keep operating until my body gave out or my luck ran out. Now I'm sitting here with you, having the most honest conversation we've had in 15 years, and I'm thinking maybe there are other things worth fighting for. The words hung between us, raw and unfinished. Sarah stood and crossed to where I sat. She took the phone from my hands and set it aside, then placed her palms on either side of my face, forcing me to look at her. "I'm not asking you to choose," she said quietly. "Between me and the work, that's not fair, and it's not sustainable. What I'm asking is for you to include me, to let me be part of the decision-making instead of just dealing with the consequences of decisions you make alone. What if including you puts you in danger? Then we assess that danger together and make an informed choice. Like adults, like partners." Her thumbs brushed against my cheekbones. "I'm stronger than you think I am, David. I've had to be, married to a ghost for 15 years. I pulled her close, resting my forehead against hers. We stayed like that for a long moment, breathing the same air, existing in the same space without the walls I'd built between us. "I need to make some calls," I said finally. "Set up meetings. Ask for the permissions you requested. It's going to take time." "How much time?" "Days, maybe weeks. The bureaucracy of secrecy moves slowly." "I can wait," Sarah said. "I've waited 15 years. I can wait a little longer for the truth." She kissed me, then soft, tentative, like she was testing whether we still fit together. We did, but differently. Like pieces of a puzzle that had been forced into the wrong configuration and were finally finding their proper places. When she pulled back, her eyes were clear. "Make your calls," she said. "Go to your meeting. Do whatever you need to do. But tonight, you come home and we talk more. Really talk. About everything. Your missions, your fears, your regrets, all of it." "All of it," I agreed. She returned to the bedroom to change. leaving me with my phone and my impossible task. How to bring Sarah into a world designed specifically to keep people like her out. I started with General Hartley. He answered on the first ring. Chen, I was beginning to worry. I'm fine, sir, but we need to talk. Not just about operational security. About my wife. About bringing her into the fold, at least partially. There was a long pause. That's irregular. Everything about last night was irregular, I said. But it happened. And now I'm trying to figure out how to move forward without destroying my marriage or compromising national security. I need help, General. Guidance. A path that doesn't require choosing between the mission and the woman I love. Another pause, longer this time. Meet me before your debrief? Hartley said finally. 1,100 hours. There's a coffee shop near the facility, the Daily Grind. We'll talk off the record. I may have some ideas. Thank you, sir. Don't thank me yet. This is going to be complicated, and there are no guarantees. But you're not the first operator to face this situation, and you won't be the last. We'll figure it out. The call ended. I sat there holding the phone, feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. It was fragile, uncertain, possibly misguided. But it was there. Sarah emerged from the bedroom dressed for work. She had a research position at a pharmaceutical company, studying protein interactions. Normal work, legal work, work she could explain at dinner parties. I'm going to the lab, she said. I need to pretend everything is normal for a few hours. Process this in my own way. Okay. She paused at the door. David, when you come home tonight, bring dinner. Something nice. Not because you're trying to make up for anything, but because we're starting over. And new beginnings deserve celebration. What are we celebrating? I asked. Honesty, she said simply. Finally. Then she was gone, leaving me alone with the morning light and the weight of 15 years of secrets finally beginning to lift. I looked at my phone. At the missed messages, the waiting meetings, the bureaucracy of revelation I was about to navigate. Then I looked around our small apartment at the life we'd built on foundations of sand that we were now trying to rebuild on something more solid. It wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, I believed it might be possible. The Daily Grind was the kind of coffee shop that existed in every city. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, a chalkboard menu with drinks that had too many adjectives. The kind of place where young professionals worked on laptops and elderly couples shared pastries and nobody paid attention to anyone else. Perfect for conversations that needed to happen but couldn't officially exist. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from years of operations where early meant alive and late meant compromised. I chose a table in the back corner with sight lines to both exits and the street outside. Old habits. General Hartley arrived exactly at 1,100 hours, wearing civilian clothes, jeans, a button-down shirt, a jacket that was nice but not expensive. He looked different out of uniform. Smaller somehow, though his bearing was still unmistakable. He ordered a black coffee and joined me at the table. Thank you for meeting me, sir, I said. Tom, he corrected. When we're not in official spaces, it's Tom, and I should be thanking you. What I did at the wedding, revealing your identity, even partially, that was reckless. I put you and your wife in a difficult position. You recognized someone you respected, I said. That's not reckless. It's human. It's both, Tom said. And it's created a situation we need to manage carefully. He sipped his coffee, his eyes scanning the room out of habit. Tell me about your wife. What does she know now? Everything I could tell her without violating classified protocols, I said. The broad strokes of my work, the nature of the operations, the reasons for the secrecy. She's processing it, trying to reconcile the husband she thought she had with the reality. How's she handling it? Better than I expected, worse than I hoped. I turned my own coffee cup in my hands. She wants to see it. My other life. Meet the people I work with. Understand the context. She thinks it's the only way forward. Tom nodded slowly. That's not unreasonable. It's also not simple. I know. That's why I'm here. I need to know what's possible. What permissions exist for bringing a spouse into partial clearance? What I can show her without compromising operational security? The short answer, Tom said, it depends on your clearance level, your operational status, your handler's assessment, and ultimately on whether the brass thinks the risk is worth the benefit. And the long answer? He smiled slightly. The long answer is that there are precedents. Operators who've brought spouses into limited knowledge. Not full clearance, that's almost never granted to civilians without specific need, but awareness, context, enough understanding to make informed decisions about the life they're living. What do those arrangements typically look like? Tom leaned back in his chair. Structured introductions. Your wife meets some, not all of your colleagues. She sees your office, if you have one. She's briefed on the general nature of your work without specific operational details. She signs non-disclosure agreements that carry serious legal weight. And she accepts that there will always be parts of your life she can't access. Would that be enough? I asked. Enough for her to feel included without being overwhelmed? That's not a question I can answer, Tom said. That's between you and Sarah. But I can tell you that the operators I know who've done this successfully, who've managed to maintain both the marriage and the mission, they all established clear boundaries. What can be shared, what can't. What questions are fair, which ones aren't. It's like negotiating a treaty between two nations with different interests, but a common goal. I thought about Sarah, about her request for honesty, her need to understand. Would partial knowledge be worse than no knowledge? Would knowing just enough to worry but not enough to comprehend actually make things harder? There's something else, Tom said, his voice lowering. Something you need to consider before you go down this path. What? Once she knows, really knows, she can't unknow it. And that knowledge makes her a potential vector, not for intentional compromise, but for inadvertent exposure. She'll carry information that people might want. That makes her a target, however unlikely, however theoretical. I've thought about that, I said. Have you thought about what it does to your marriage when you're both looking over your shoulders? When she's wondering if the person asking casual questions at a dinner party is actually fishing for intelligence? When she can't talk to her friends or family about her worries because they're classified? I hadn't thought about that. Not really. I'd been so focused on the immediate problem, Sarah feeling excluded, Sarah needing truth, that I hadn't considered the long-term implications of inclusion. You're saying I should keep her in the dark, I said. I'm saying there are costs either way, Tom corrected. Exclusion has costs, we've seen that in your marriage. But inclusion has costs too. Different ones, but just as real. You need to understand both before you make this choice. We sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop noise continuing around us, the hiss of the espresso machine, the murmur of conversations, the clatter of keyboards. My first wife, Tom said eventually. I told her everything, every operation, every risk, every close call. I thought it was honesty, transparency. What it actually was me unburdening myself at her expense. Every time I deployed, she knew exactly what I was walking into. Every time I came home late, she knew the kind of situations that might have delayed me. That knowledge ate her alive from the inside out. And your second wife? I told her nothing, kept the whole thing compartmentalized. She knew I was military, knew I deployed, but not the details, not the real nature of the work. He smiled sadly. That marriage ended too. She felt like she was living with a stranger, like I was keeping her at arm's length emotionally, because I was keeping her at arm's length informationally. So, there's no right answer, I said. There's only the answer that works for you and Sarah, Tom said. But here's what I learned. The problem wasn't how much or how little I told them. The problem was that I didn't involve them in deciding what they wanted to know. I made unilateral choices about what they could handle, what they should know, what would be too much. I was still operating like a soldier, assessing threats, making tactical decisions instead of operating like a husband. The words landed like ordnance, precisely targeted. Sarah said something similar. I admitted that she didn't need me to protect her from the truth. She needed me to trust her with it. Smart woman. Always has been. I just didn't listen. Tom checked his watch. You have your debrief in 2 hours. They're going to ask you about exposure risk, about who knows what, about whether your operational effectiveness has been compromised. What are you going to tell them? The truth, I said. That my cover was partially blown in front of approximately 50 people, some of whom have connections to foreign governments, defense contractors, and media. That my wife now knows the general nature of my work. That my effectiveness as a completely anonymous operator is probably over. And what do you want from them? I'd been thinking about this since Sarah left for work. What did I want? What was I willing to fight for? I want permission to bring Sarah into limited awareness, I said. Not full clearance, not operational details, but enough that she understands the context of my absences, the importance of the work, the reasons for the secrecy. And I want flexibility, the ability to make choices about when to deploy, when to stay home, when the mission is critical enough to require me, and when someone else can handle it. That's asking a lot, Tom said. I've given a lot, I countered. 15 years of my life, 47 deployments, success rates that speak for themselves. If the organization wants to keep me, they need to give me the space to have a life alongside the mission. Tom studied me for a long moment. You've changed since last night. There's something different about you. I stopped pretending I could have it both ways, I said. Stopped thinking I could maintain perfect separation between the operator and the husband. They're the same person. They've always been the same person. I just need to figure out how to integrate them instead of compartmentalizing them. That's going to be harder than you think, Tom warned. The bureaucracy doesn't like integration. It likes clean lines, clear boundaries, defined parameters. Then I'll fight the bureaucracy. You might lose. Then I'll lose, I said. But at least I'll lose trying to do the right thing instead of losing by default because I was too afraid to try. Tom smiled, a genuine smile this time, not the sad professional ones from before. You know what? I think you might actually pull this off. You've got something most operators don't have by the time they reach your level. What's that? A reason to come home that matters more than the mission. We finished our coffee and walked out together into the late morning sun. The city was alive with normal activity, people going to work, running errands, living lives that didn't involve classified operations or encrypted communications. One more thing, Tom said as we stood on the sidewalk. Rebecca called me this morning, my new daughter-in-law. She was very apologetic, very emotional, and very insistent that I help fix what she helped break. She texted me too, I said. I haven't responded yet. She wants to apologize to you directly, to Sarah. She's taking responsibility for how she treated you, for the assumptions she made. Tom paused. She also asked if there was anything she could do to help, to support you and Sarah through this. That's unexpected. People surprise you sometimes, Tom said. Sometimes a shock to the system like finding out you've been completely wrong about someone can catalyze real change. Maybe Rebecca's one of those people. Or maybe she's just embarrassed and trying to save face. Maybe, Tom agreed. But give her a chance to prove which it is. Grace costs you nothing. And you might be surprised. We shook hands, and he headed toward his car. I stood there for a moment, watching the city move around me, thinking about grace and second chances and whether any of us deserved them. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. How's it going? I typed back, better than expected. Meeting with Brass at 2, home by 6. I'll bring dinner. Her response came quickly. Chinese. From the place on Morrison Street. Extra spring rolls. Done. I love you. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then appeared again. Finally, I love you too. Figure this out for us. I would, or I'd die trying. The facility was unmarked, unremarkable, indistinguishable from the other office buildings on this industrial stretch of road. You'd drive past it 100 times and never wonder what happened inside. That was intentional. I showed my credentials at the underground parking entrance, submitted to retinal scan and fingerprint verification, and made my way through 3 separate security checkpoints. before reaching the elevator that would take me to the meeting room. The elevator required a keycard, a 6-digit PIN, and voice authentication, overkill for most purposes, necessary for this one. The doors opened onto a hallway that could have been in any corporate office anywhere in America. Neutral carpet, bland artwork, fluorescent lighting that made everything look slightly unreal. Conference room C was third on the left. Inside, 4 people waited. Colonel Patricia Morrison, who I'd met briefly at the wedding. A woman in her early 40s who I didn't recognize, wearing a suit that screamed federal agency. A man about my age in navy dress blues with commander insignia. And my handler, a man I'd known for 7 years only as Brooks, though I suspected that wasn't his real name. "Chen," Brooks said. "Glad you could make it." "Wouldn't miss it," I said, taking a seat at the table. Morrison made the introductions. "This is Deputy Director Karen Walsh from the Defense Intelligence Agency and Commander Michael Torres from Naval Special Warfare. They're here because your situation has implications beyond just our operational unit." "My situation," I repeated carefully. "You mean my wedding date?" Walsh leaned forward. "Mr. Chen, we need to understand exactly what was disclosed, to whom, and what the potential fallout might be. Can you walk us through the events of last night, starting with when General Hartley first recognized you?" I did, keeping the details precise, clinical. The terrace conversation, Hartley's revelation to Gregory, the confrontation in the reception hall, the information that was shared, the people who heard it, the subsequent spread of knowledge. When I finished, there was a long silence. "So approximately 50 people now know that David Chen is connected to classified special operations," Walsh summarized. "Including foreign nationals?" "No foreign nationals were present," I said. "The guest list was vetted. It was a military family wedding. Everyone there either had security clearance already or was a vetted civilian with no foreign connections." "That we know of," Torres interjected. "But people talk. They go home. They tell their spouses, their friends. Information spreads like a virus, which is why I'm here," I said, "to help you assess the damage and determine next steps." Brooks spoke for the first time. "The real question is whether you can continue operating effectively. The ghost persona was built on complete anonymity. That anonymity is now compromised." "Partially compromised," I corrected, "to a specific group of people in a specific context. I'm not plastered all over social media. Foreign intelligence services don't suddenly have my photo. The compromise is contained. For now," Morrison said. "But it creates risk. If you deploy again and someone recognizes you, someone who was at that wedding, someone who heard the story secondhand, it could expose the operation." "It could," I agreed. "Or I could operate in different theaters, different contexts, places where a wedding guest list from Virginia isn't likely to intersect with operational space." Walsh shook her head. "That's not how we manage risk, Mr. Chen. We don't hope for the best. We plan for the worst." "Then what are you proposing?" I asked. "Early retirement? Reassignment to desk duty? Giving me a new identity and starting from scratch?" The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They'd already discussed this, already made preliminary decisions. This meeting was just notification with the illusion of consultation. "We're proposing a transition," Brooks said carefully. "Moving you from field operations to a training and advisory role. You'd still be valuable to the organization, your expertise, your experience, your judgment. But you'd be doing it from a position that doesn't require anonymity." "You're benching me," I said flatly. "We're protecting the broader mission," Morrison corrected. "You've had an exceptional career, Chen. 15 years of successful operations. But all careers have arcs. Maybe this is the natural conclusion of yours." I looked at each of them in turn. Morrison, who meant well but was thinking strategically rather than personally. Torres, who probably saw me as a cautionary tale about maintaining cover. Walsh, who was calculating risk matrices and probability assessments. Brooks, who looked uncomfortable but resigned. "I have a counter-proposal," I said. Brooks raised an eyebrow. "We're listening." "Keep me active. Limited deployment schedule, maybe 6 operations a year instead of the current pace. Different operational theaters, as I suggested. And grant my wife limited security awareness. Not full clearance, but enough context to understand what I do and why it matters. That's not protocol, Walsh said immediately. Protocol didn't anticipate my situation, I countered. Protocol assumes operators either keep perfect cover or wash out. I'm proposing a third option, controlled integration. Let me be effective in the field while maintaining a functional marriage. You get a seasoned operator with proven success. I get a life that doesn't require choosing between duty and family. And if we say no? Torres asked. Then I retire, I said simply. Effective immediately. You lose my capabilities entirely, instead of having them on a reduced but still functional basis. The silence was different this time. Calculating. Uncertain. Morrison leaned back in her chair. You'd actually walk away. After 15 years. After everything you've invested in this career. I've already lost my marriage once, I said. I just got a chance to maybe save it. I'm not going to waste that chance by choosing a job over my wife. Even a job I love. Even a job that matters. Brooks and Morrison exchanged a look. Some kind of silent communication that came from years of working together. We'll need to discuss this, Brooks said finally. Among ourselves, and with higher authority. It's not a decision we can make in this room. But I understand, I said. How long? 72 hours, Walsh said. We'll have an answer for you by Friday. I stood. Then I'll wait to hear from you. Chen, Morrison said as I reached the door. For what it's worth, I hope they approve your proposal. The organization needs people who understand that the mission isn't just abstract, that the things we're protecting, families, relationships, normal life, those things have to include our own families too. I nodded and left. The drive home took longer than it should have. Traffic, construction, the usual urban obstacles. I used the time to call Rebecca. She answered on the second ring. David, thank you for calling back. Your text said you wanted to talk. I did. I do. She sounded nervous, which was unusual for Rebecca. I wanted to apologize. For everything. For how I treated you. For the assumptions I made. For the cruel things I said. You didn't deserve any of that. You didn't know, I said. That's not an excuse, she countered. I should have been kinder regardless. I should have given you the benefit of the doubt. Instead, I judged you based on appearances and let that judgment poison how I treated you, how I encouraged Sarah to think about you. Sarah makes her own decisions, but I influenced them. I know I did, and I'm sorry for that too. I merged onto the highway, watching the city scroll past. Why now, Rebecca? Why the sudden change? Because I saw the truth, she said quietly. Not just about who you are, but about who I am. I built my entire life around appearances, around status and connections, and how things looked to other people. And when the facade cracked, when I realized I'd been wrong about something fundamental, it made me question everything else I thought I knew. That's a lot of questioning. It is, and I'm not done yet. But I wanted to start by making this right, or at least trying to. She paused. Can I help? With you and Sarah? Is there anything I can do? I thought about it. Be there for her. When I can't be. When I'm deployed or in meetings or dealing with classified situations. Be the sister she deserves instead of the one who made her feel inadequate. I can do that, Rebecca said. I will do that. I will do that. Then we're okay. Really? Really, I said. Grace costs me nothing, and everyone deserves second chances. She laughed softly. Someone wise said that to you recently. They did. We said goodbye, and I continued driving. The weight on my chest feeling slightly lighter than it had been. By the time I reached the Chinese restaurant on Morrison Street, I was almost smiling. I ordered Sarah's favorites, kung pao, chicken, vegetable lo mein, extra spring rolls, and headed home to start the next chapter of our honest life together. Whatever the brass decided, Whatever happened next, I had this moment. I had tonight. I had truth, finally. After 15 years of shadows. And maybe that would be enough to build something real. Sarah was already home when I arrived, changed into comfortable clothes, leggings, and an oversized sweater that had been mine once upon a time. Before she'd claimed it through the unspoken treaty of long-term cohabitation, she'd set the table. Our small dining table that we rarely used because it was easier to eat on the couch, easier to avoid the intimacy of sitting across from each other with nothing to distract from whatever conversations we were avoiding. But tonight, she'd set it with actual plates instead of eating from containers, cloth napkins instead of paper. 2 glasses of water, ice already melting at the edges. "This feels formal," I said, setting down the bags of food. "It's important," Sarah replied. "Important things deserve a little ceremony." We unpacked the containers together, the smell of ginger and soy sauce filling our small apartment. She'd put on music, something instrumental and quiet, the kind of background noise that filled space without demanding attention. We sat. We served ourselves. We began to eat. And for the first few minutes, neither of us spoke. It was Sarah who finally broke the silence. "Tell me about the worst one," she said quietly. "The mission that still keeps you up at night." I set down my chopsticks. This was the conversation I'd been dreading and expecting in equal measure. "Are you sure you want to know?" "No," she said honestly, "but I need to know. If we're going to do this, really do this, I need to understand not just the successful operations and the lives saved. I need to understand the cost, what it takes from you, what you carry." I looked at her across the table, at the woman who'd agreed to marry me in a courthouse 15 years ago, who'd kissed me goodbye at airports dozens of times, who'd welcomed me home from deployments with questions she'd learned not to ask. She deserved the truth, even the hard parts, especially the hard parts. "Afghanistan," I said. 4 years ago, there was a village, I can't tell you where exactly that was, being used as a staging ground for Taliban operations. Intelligence indicated they were planning an attack on a girls' school in Kabul, a school with over 300 students. Sarah nodded, encouraging me to continue. The order was to eliminate the leadership. 4 men who were coordinating the attack. Standard operation: infiltrate, confirm identities, execute, extract. I went in alone, at night, during a local festival, when security would be distracted. I could still see it. The village lit by oil lamps and small fires, children running between houses, playing games that probably hadn't changed in centuries. The smell of cooking meat and spices, laughter, life. I found the targets. They were meeting in a compound at the edge of the village. I confirmed identities, prepared to execute, but there were complications. What kind of complications? One of the targets had his son with him, a boy, maybe 8 years old. He was supposed to be asleep, but he'd woken up, come into the room. He was sitting there playing with a toy truck while his father discussed logistics for an attack that would kill hundreds of children his age. Sarah's hand moved to her mouth. "What did you do?" I waited. I had a 6-hour window before extraction. I waited for the boy to leave, to fall asleep, to be anywhere else, but he stayed. He stayed, and the clock was running, and I had to make a choice. "You didn't." "I didn't kill the boy," I said quickly. "I'm not. I couldn't. Instead, I created a distraction." Set a small fire in another building, created enough chaos that the targets sent the boy away to help. Then, I completed the mission. So it worked out. The mission worked out, I corrected. The school didn't get attacked. 300 girls continued their education. That part was a success. But I took a breath. This was the part I'd never told anyone. The part that lived in the space between official reports and personal reckoning. But I think about that boy all the time. What he felt when he came back and found his father dead. What it did to him. Whether he grew up hating Americans, joining the Taliban himself, becoming the next generation of someone I'd have to eliminate. Whether saving 300 children meant creating one more enemy in an endless cycle of violence. "You saved those girls," Sarah said firmly. "You stopped an attack." I did, and I'd make the same choice again. But that doesn't mean it doesn't cost me something. Every time. Every mission, even the successful ones. I met her eyes, especially the successful ones. Sarah reached across the table and took my hand. Her fingers were warm, steady. "Is that what the nightmares are about?" she asked. "The ones you pretend you don't have?" So, she'd noticed. Of course, she'd noticed. "Sometimes," I admitted. "Sometimes it's that boy. Sometimes it's the faces of the people I've killed, the ones I saw clearly, the ones who had time to understand what was happening. Sometimes it's the operations that went wrong, the close calls, the moments when luck was the only thing between me and a body bag. How do you live with it? How do you live with it?" I remind myself why I do it. I think about the attacks that didn't happen, the hostages who made it home, the intelligence that prevented larger catastrophes. I tell myself that the world is full of people making impossible choices, and at least I'm making them with the intent to protect rather than destroy. Does that help? Sometimes, I said, and sometimes I just accept that this is the price. That if I'm going to do this work, if I'm going to operate in the spaces between what's legal and what's necessary, then I have to carry the weight of those choices. There's no one else to give it to. Sarah squeezed my hand. "You could have given some of it to me, shared the burden. That's what partners do." "I know that now," I said. I didn't want you to have to carry it. Didn't want you to look at me and see someone who'd taken lives, made brutal calculations, prioritized mission success over moral certainty. "David." Her voice was gentle but firm. "I already knew you were capable of hard things. You don't hide as well as you think you do. I saw the scars, not just the physical ones, but the ones in your eyes when you came home from deployments. I saw the way you'd wake up at night, breathing hard, and tell me it was just a dream. I saw how you'd go quiet sometimes, distant, like you were somewhere else entirely. You never said anything, because you didn't want me to," she said. "Because every time I got close to asking real questions, you'd deflect or change the subject, or suddenly remember something you needed to do. So I learned to stop asking, but that didn't mean I stopped seeing." The music in the background shifted to something slightly more melancholic. Our food was getting cold, but neither of us moved to eat. "My turn," Sarah said. "Okay." She took a breath, gathering her thoughts. 3 years ago, you were deployed. I don't even remember where you said you were going. Dubai, maybe? Or Singapore? One of your generic business trip covers. You were gone for 2 months. I remembered. It had been Pakistan, actually. A hostage situation that turned into a manhunt, that turned into a cross-border extraction. One of the longest, most complicated operations I'd ever been part of. "While you were gone," Sarah continued, "I met someone, a colleague at work. He was kind, attentive, always available. Everything you weren't." My chest tightened, but I kept my expression neutral. "Did you?" "No," she said quickly. "I didn't cheat on you, but I thought about it. I thought about it a lot. He asked me out for drinks, and I said yes. We went to dinner a few times. He made it clear he was interested. And I was so lonely, David. So tired of coming home to an empty apartment, of eating dinner alone, of pretending I had a husband, when most of the time I felt like a widow married to a ghost. Why didn't you?" "Because I still loved you," she said simply. "Because even though I was angry and hurt and confused about why you couldn't just be present, I still believed that the man I married was in there somewhere. That the person who made me feel seen and valued and cherished was real, even if he'd been buried under layers of absence and secrecy." "I'm sorry," I said. "I'm so sorry I put you in that position." "I'm not telling you this to make you feel guilty," Sarah said. "I'm telling you because if we're going to rebuild this marriage on honesty, you need to know that I came close to leaving. That there were moments when I thought the easier path would be to just let go, to start over with someone whose life made sense." "What stopped you?" She smiled sadly. "The same thing that's stopping me now. Hope. Stupid, stubborn hope that we could figure this out. That love could be enough if we just tried harder, communicated better, stopped hiding from each other." We sat in the weight of these confessions, mine about the violence I'd committed, Hers about the infidelity she'd contemplated. Two people who'd been living parallel lives, intersecting only at carefully managed points, finally occupying the same emotional space. The meeting this afternoon, I said. They want to bench me, move me to training and advisory. No more field operations. How do you feel about that? Conflicted, I admitted. Part of me is relieved. The idea of being home more, of not constantly deploying, of having a life that's more predictable, it's appealing. But another part feels like I'm abandoning something important, like there's still work that needs doing, and I'm the best person to do it. What did you tell them? I proposed a compromise, limited deployment schedule, different operational theaters, and permission to bring you into partial awareness, not full clearance, but enough context to understand what I do. Sarah's eyes widened. They're considering that? They're discussing it. I'll have an answer by Friday. And if they say no, then I retire, I said. Immediately. I already told them. I'm not choosing the mission over you, again. Not after getting a second chance. David. She stood and moved around the table, settling into my lap, her arms around my neck. You don't have to choose me over the mission. That's not what I'm asking. What are you asking? What? I'm asking you to choose us. To build a life where both things can exist, your work and our marriage, where you get to be the operator and the husband, without one destroying the other. She pressed her forehead to mine. If they approve your proposal, if they let you keep operating on a limited schedule, would you be okay with that, or would you resent the limitations? I thought about it honestly. I don't know. I've spent 15 years at maximum operational tempo. Slowing down might feel like failure at first, but it might also feel like relief, like permission to be something other than the ghost. Who do you want to be? Sarah asked. If you could choose? I want to be David Chen, I said. Your husband. A man who does important work but doesn't let it consume everything else. Someone who comes home and means it. Who's present, not just physically, but emotionally. Who builds a life instead of just surviving between deployments. That sounds nice, she murmured. I'd like to meet that version of you. You're meeting him right now. We stayed like that for a while, holding each other in our small apartment with its cold Chinese food and its quiet music and its years of accumulated silence, finally giving way to something more honest. Tell me something good, Sarah said eventually, about your work. Not the nightmares or the close calls. Tell me about a time when what you did made a difference in a way you could see. I smiled, remembering. There was a woman in Syria, aid worker, who'd been kidnapped by ISIS. They were holding her for ransom, planning to execute her when the deadline passed. Her family couldn't pay. They didn't have that kind of money. The government had a no negotiation policy. She was going to die. What happened? We found her. Took 3 weeks of intelligence gathering, surveillance, building a network of local contacts. When we finally located her, she was being held in a basement in Raqqa, guarded by 4 fighters. The operation took 12 minutes from breach to extraction. You got her out. We got her out. Flew her to a coalition base. Then back to the States. I saw her once after they had a debriefing where she could thank the team. She was shaking, crying, could barely speak. But she looked at each of us and said, "You gave me my life back." Sarah's eyes were bright with tears. That's what you do. You give people their lives back. Sometimes, I said, when we're lucky and skilled and the intelligence is good. Not always, but sometimes. That's enough, she said. That has to be enough to balance the rest. Did it? I'd spent years trying to make that calculation, whether the lives saved outweighed the lives taken, whether the good I'd done erased the violence I'd committed. I still didn't have an answer. Maybe there wasn't one. But sitting there with Sarah, feeling her weight in my lap and her breath against my neck, I thought maybe the equation wasn't about perfect balance. Maybe it was just about doing the best you could with impossible choices and learning to live with the outcomes. We should eat, Sarah said, not moving. Before the food gets completely inedible. We should, I agreed, also not moving. In a minute. In a minute. We stayed there, in our moment of honesty and hope and tentative rebuilding, while the city continued outside our window, and our future hung, suspended in a conference room somewhere, waiting to be decided by people who would weigh risk against benefit and make their calculations. Whatever they decided, we had this. We had truth, finally. We had each other, maybe. And we had 3 days to build a foundation strong enough to withstand whatever came next. Later, after we'd reheated the food and actually eaten, after we'd done the dishes together in comfortable silence, after we'd moved to the couch, and Sarah had curled against me while we watched a movie neither of us paid attention to, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "This is Dorothy Hartley, Gregory's grandmother. We met at the wedding. I have something I'd like to discuss with you. Coffee tomorrow? My treat." I showed it to Sarah. "The elderly woman from the back row?" she asked. "The one who said complicated people have stories." "You should go," Sarah said. "I'm curious what Gregory's grandmother wants to talk to you about. Probably wants to tell me I'm corrupting her grandson with classified information." Or, Sarah said, "Maybe she wants to help. You said she was kind. Maybe she sees something we don't." I typed back, "Tomorrow works. Time and place?" The response came quickly. "Same coffee shop where you met Tom. 9 a.m. I promise this won't be unpleasant." 9 a.m. at the Daily Grind, I told Sarah. "That's where you met General Hartley this morning." Apparently it's becoming my unofficial meeting spot for conversations that can't officially happen. Sarah smiled. "Your life is so weird now that I know about it. It's always been weird. You just didn't have context." "True." She settled deeper against me. "David, thank you. For tonight. For telling me the hard things. For trusting me with the truth. Thank you for staying," I said. "For giving me another chance when I didn't deserve one." "We both deserve second chances," she said. "That's what love means. Getting to try again when you fail the first time." The movie played on, something about a heist and complicated relationships and people trying to rebuild trust after betrayal. Fitting in its way. I held Sarah close and thought about Dorothy Hartley, about what an elementary school teacher turned military grandmother might want to discuss with a former ghost. I thought about the brass and their 72-hour deliberation. I thought about Rebecca and her surprising transformation. I thought about the wedding that had changed everything, that had taken a carefully constructed cover and shattered it like glass, leaving sharp edges and truth in its wake. And I thought that maybe, sometimes, things had to break before they could be rebuilt into something stronger. Maybe that's what was happening now. Breaking and rebuilding, ending and beginning. Becoming someone new while remembering who we'd always been. The credits rolled. Sarah was asleep against my shoulder, her breathing slow and steady. I stayed awake, watching the darkness outside our window gradually give way to the first hints of dawn, thinking about coffee with a stranger and decisions from bureaucrats and the uncertain future of a marriage built on honesty instead of secrets. 3 days until the verdict. 1 night of truth survived. A lifetime of complicated choices still ahead. But for now, in this moment, we had enough. Dorothy Hartley was already seated when I arrived at the Daily Grind, a pot of tea steaming between 2 cups at a corner table. She wore a cardigan that looked hand-knitted and reading glasses on a chain around her neck. "Mr. Chen," she greeted me warmly. "Thank you for meeting an old woman's curiosity." "David, please." I sat across from her, and I'm the one who's curious. "What did you want to discuss?" She poured tea into both cups with steady hands. "I've been thinking about you since the wedding, about what was revealed, how it was revealed, and what it cost you. I'm managing." "I'm sure you are. You strike me as someone who's very good at managing." She added honey to her tea, stirred slowly. "My late husband was military, Navy, submariner. He spent months at a time underwater, unreachable, doing work he could never discuss. I know something about the particular loneliness of loving someone who lives in secrets." I sipped the tea. It was good, something floral and delicate. "How did you handle it?" I asked. "Poorly at first. Dorothy admitted. I resented the absences, resented the non-answers, built up stories in my head about what he must be doing, who he must be becoming without me. We almost divorced 3 times before our 10th anniversary. What changed? I stopped trying to know everything and started trying to understand anything. She met my eyes. There's a difference. Knowing requires complete information. Understanding requires empathy, trust, and acceptance that some questions don't have answers you can live with. Sarah wants to know, I said. She's asked to see my other life, meet my colleagues, understand the context. And you're worried that knowing will be worse than not knowing? Yes, Dorothy nodded. That's a reasonable fear. But here's what I learned after 43 years married to a man who kept secrets. The not knowing creates a void. And humans are terrible. With voids we fill them with assumptions, usually the worst ones. Your wife has spent 15 years filling the void of your absences with stories about failure and inadequacy. The truth might be frightening, but it can't be worse than what she's already imagined. I thought about Sarah's confession, about the colleague she'd almost left me for, the loneliness that had driven her to the edge of infidelity. Dorothy was right. The void had nearly destroyed us. The organization wants to bench me? I said. Move me away from field operations. My wife wants inclusion. I'm trying to find a middle path that satisfies everyone, and wondering if such a path even exists. It doesn't, Dorothy said simply. There is no path that satisfies everyone. There's only the path that honors what matters most to you. What does matter most, David? The question cut through all the tactical thinking, all the strategic planning, all the careful calculations. Sarah, I said, coming home to her, building something real that doesn't require choosing between duty and love. Then that's your answer, Dorothy smiled. Everything else is just logistics. Logistics can be complicated. Logistics can be negotiated. She corrected. And you strike me as someone who's very good at negotiating difficult situations. You've just been negotiating with everyone except the person who matters most. She was right. I've been so focused on managing operational security, maintaining my cover, protecting Sarah from knowledge I deemed dangerous, I'd never actually negotiated with her. Never asked what she needed, what she could handle, what price she was willing to pay for truth. My grandson called me yesterday, Dorothy said. He's struggling with what he learned about you. He married Rebecca, thinking she came from a simple family, successful sister, struggling brother-in-law, normal middle-class dynamics. Now he knows that reality was a carefully constructed fiction. It's shaken his certainty about what's real. I'm sorry for that. Don't be. Uncertainty is good for Gregory. He spent his life in military structures where everything has clear hierarchy and defined parameters. Learning that reality is more complex than org charts and protocols, that's valuable. She finished her tea and poured another cup. I wanted to meet with you for 2 reasons, Dorothy continued. First, to tell you that what you're attempting integration rather than separation, it's possible. My husband and I found our version of it eventually. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. And honest imperfection beats dishonest perfection every time. And the second reason? To offer help, she said. I know people. People in the military community, in government, in places where decisions get made about operators and security clearances and spousal awareness protocols. If you need an advocate, someone outside the chain of command but inside the culture I'm offering, why would you do that for me? Dorothy's smile was gentle. Because I sat in the back row of my grandson's wedding and watched a man accept humiliation with grace. Because you could have defended yourself, could have revealed who you were to spare yourself embarrassment, but you chose silence instead. That kind of discipline, that kind of character, it deserves support. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Don't thank me yet. I haven't done anything except drink tea and offer wisdom that may or may not be useful. She gathered her purse. But call me if you need me. I mean that. She stood to leave, then paused. One more thing, David. Sarah, she's stronger than you think. Strong enough to carry some of your burden. Trust her with your truth. Even the hard parts. Especially the hard parts. That's where real intimacy lives. She left me sitting there with cooling tea and the weight of her words settling like snow. My phone buzzed. A text from Sarah. How did it go? I typed back, better than expected. She's wise. All the best people are. Come home soon? On my way. I paid for the tea and stepped out into the morning sun, thinking about voids and truth and the difference between knowing and understanding. 2 more days until the brass made their decision. But Dorothy was right, their decision was just logistics. The real decision was the one I'd already made, to choose Sarah, to choose honesty, to choose a life built on truth instead of carefully managed fiction. Everything else would follow. Friday came with rain. I watched it streak down our apartment window while Sarah made coffee, the sky gray and heavy with the kind of weather that made everything feel slower, more deliberate. My phone sat on the counter, silent. The 72 hours were up at noon. Any minute now, it would ring with the verdict that would shape the next chapter of my life. You're nervous, Sarah observed, handing me a mug. I'm prepared for either outcome, I said, which was true, but incomplete. That's not the same as not being nervous. She was right. She was always right these days, now that I was actually listening. The phone rang at 11:47 a.m. Brooks's name on the screen. I answered on speaker so Sarah could hear. She deserved that much. She deserved everything. Chen, Brooks said, we have a decision. I'm listening. The brass reviewed your proposal. They consulted with Walsh, Morrison, Torres, and several levels above them. They considered operational security, precedent, risk assessment, and a dozen other factors I won't bore you with. And they're approving it. Modified, but approved. Sarah's hand found mine. You'll transition to limited active status, Brooks continued. Maximum 6 deployments per year, your choice of operations within reason. You'll also take on a training role 2 weeks per quarter at the facility, teaching the next generation of operators. And your wife will be granted limited spousal awareness clearance, which includes facility access, introduction to select personnel, and contextual briefings on the nature of your work. What are the restrictions? I asked. She can't know specific operational details, locations, targets, mission parameters. She can't be told about ongoing operations until they're completed. And she signs a comprehensive NDA, with teeth that would make a shark jealous. I can live with that, Sarah said. There's one more condition, Brooks added. You both attend monthly counseling sessions with a cleared therapist who specializes in operator families. Non-negotiable. Quote, we accept, I said. Good. Report Monday to begin the transition paperwork. And Chen, this is unprecedented. Don't make us regret it. I won't, sir. The call ended. Sarah and I stood there in our kitchen, holding hands, the rain continuing its quiet percussion against glass. We did it, she said softly. We actually did it. We're going to do it, I corrected. This is just the beginning. She kissed me then, deep and certain, and full of all the hope we'd been too afraid to feel for too long. The following Saturday, Rebecca hosted a dinner. Not the elaborate showpiece gathering she usually favored, but something simple at her and Gregory's new apartment. Just the 4 of us, David, Sarah, Rebecca, Gregory, and Dorothy, who'd been invited as a thank you for her unexpected intervention. The food was takeout pizza. The conversation was honest. And when Rebecca stood to make a toast, her eyes were clear. To new beginnings, she said. To admitting when we're wrong. To family that's stronger for being honest instead of perfect. To David, Gregory added, who taught me that heroism isn't about being recognized. It's about doing what's necessary, even when no one knows. To Sarah, I said, looking at my wife across the table, who was brave enough to demand the truth and patient enough to wait for me to be ready to give it. Sarah raised her glass last. To all of us, for surviving our own disasters and choosing to rebuild instead of walking away. We drank to that. Later, after Dorothy had gone home and Rebecca and Gregory had retreated to clean up, Sarah and I stood on their balcony watching the city lights. Monday you start the new job, she said. Are you ready? Monday, are you ready? Monday, 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 Monday. I don't know, but I'm not doing it alone anymore. That makes it easier. What about the ghost? Sarah asked. Does he get to retire too? I thought about the persona I'd built, the legend that had defined me for 15 years, the man who existed in shadows and silence, who operated in spaces between official acknowledgement and necessary action. The ghost was never real, I said. He was just what I became when I forgot how to be David Chen. Maybe it's time to remember. I'd like that, Sarah said. I'd like to be married to David Chen instead of a ghost. You always were, I said. I was just too afraid to let you see him. She leaned against me, and I wrapped my arms around her, and we stood there as the rain finally stopped and the clouds began to break apart. Somewhere in the city, threats still existed. Missions still waited. Violence still needed answering. But for now, in this moment, I was just a man holding his wife on a balcony, watching stars emerge through clearing skies. Just David Chen, finally visible, finally whole, finally home. 6 months later, Sarah attended her first facility tour. She met Colonel Morrison, shook hands with people whose names she couldn't repeat, and saw the spaces where I spent my other life. When we left, she took my hand and said, "Now I understand." What do you understand? Why you do it. Why it matters. Why you carry what you carry. She smiled. And I understand how lucky those people are that someone like you exists. The work continued. The deployments happened. The nightmares still came. But I came home to truth instead of fiction. To a wife who knew me, all of me, and loved me anyway. To a marriage built on honesty instead of silence. And that, finally, was enough.